Good afternoon, welcome. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, December 20th. First on our agenda this evening is a presentation on the 2022 Medco Annual Business Retention and Expansion Report.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Nick Blue, president of Marion Economic Development Corporation, and I have my team with me today, Brady Quinn, who handles a lot of what you're going to talk about and see today, our business retention work. And then Emily Russ, who works really to support our marketing and our workforce initiatives. We're going to give you a little bit of a presentation on some of our community promise work. So that's her space, and she's going to talk about that. So I'm going to kick things off real briefly. But before I do so, we want to very intentionally say thank you for your partnership and your support of our organization, especially on this BRE work. It's made possible because of the partnership that we have with you as we hit the streets throughout the year and really make sure that we're listening and responding, not necessarily to the new projects that are happening, but to the existing industry that's here and has been here for many years in our community. So thank you for that. Second, I would just want to acknowledge in the back of the room, Steve Neighbors joining us. Steve sits on the Medco Executive Committee, and actually, as of the next time that we meet, will be the board chair for the next year, for the next 2 years for our organization. So I want to acknowledge and thank Steve for being here as well. So we're just going to dive into it. I'm going to talk real briefly throughout the year. I oftentimes have the opportunity to come here and talk about these things. These are the things I talk about quite often with our board of directors. This is more the what's 2022 looked like from a new investment standpoint. We had set a goal as an organization to be really intentional in trying to get to that point of that's oftentimes the end of our work on the development front. And that's when a project starts. So starting new projects, getting that shovel in the ground. We had a goal at the beginning of the year to really work to celebrate 4 big project starts. The good thing is we had to add a shovel. So we had 5 big celebrations that we were able to celebrate together with you and other community partners here. So that's been good. Lead generation has been solid. We had a goal of developing 10 unique leads. We had 15 at the end of the year. That's a positive. The thing that we're learning from this year is we had a goal of responding to 8 RFIs. Ms. Menser might know what this means coming from the economic development world, but oftentimes as a community economic development group, we have opportunities to respond to leads that might come from the state of Iowa, might come from site selectors that have a relationship with our region. They're leads that we didn't necessarily do anything to attract, and they often come through our regional partners at the Economic Alliance. This year, if you talk to the total number of projects that our partners at the EA responded to, they had a record year. But when we looked at those projects, we only fit 5 of them. And that's because the projects that were really out there at the state level and regional level this year were projects that required a significant amount of land. We're talking 50, 100 acres at a time, and a significant number of, or a significant amount of utility use, water, wastewater. We very quickly know those aren't fits for the type of projects, the type of community that we are. So we're actually going to respond to that in 2023 by bringing on some new tools and resources to help us perhaps generate some outside leads, be more proactive on that, but leads that are a better fit for who we are as a community. And just another gauge that we've been looking at, we typically set a goal every year that we like to help support projects valued at about $50 million. We're happy to report through November. Right now, that's looking at $47.7 million. So it's been a good year, 2022 has. Despite some of the things that we talk about from an economic perspective, there was good activity in this past calendar year. This is actually a chart that represents your data. So this is data that we get. You might get these reports as well in your inbox, the building permit valuation numbers. The vertical charts, I've shown you this chart before, are the combined valuation of new commercial and then residential permits. Orange is commercial, blue is residential. So you can see how we've tracked throughout the year, but then you can also compare it to prior years. So green is how we compare to 2021. You can see those colors above. So it has been a strong year of construction collectively across the community. However, you can see in this particular year, that you could argue kind of a trend that in the latter half of the year, we've started to slow down a little bit. But the positive news is as we turn the corner to the new year, our pipeline projects that we have some conversations with, have some awareness of, like the orange that we call active prospects, that number is not sitting on the floor. So while it is harder to get projects off the ground right now, costs of construction, costs of borrowing, the positive side is there's still projects out there. So I'm going to step aside, not talk anymore about new development. We can do that again in the future. The purpose of our conversation here today is to give you a dashboard of what our existing industry is saying here in 2022. So with that, I'm going to step out of the way and invite Brady Quinn up to really drive this part of the presentation.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you for the opportunity to chat a little bit about the work we were able to complete this year in 2022. So just to give you a quick overview of this BR&E reporting that we do. So it all started in January of 2022 and runs all the way then through November. So thinking about individually where you were at in January versus where you were at in November, same thing with our business owners, right? We're just trying to get a little snapshot of how they're feeling about these different topics that we'll talk about. So we're able to conclude 83 visits with over 150 individuals representing our local employers. The median employment of these employers was 25, and the total full-time employment base was almost 6,500 employees. So we have these different topics here: community business climate, products, industry 4.0, market facility, management, supply chain, workforce. These were the themes of the different questions we asked. And then we were able to make some conclusions based on some of the themes that we were seeing. So we'll go through these individually, give you a quick overview of them. So 4% of our respondents said yes, that there is a reason that Marion would not be considered for future expansion. And 64% said yes, that there are barriers to growth in the Marion community. And I bet we can all guess what that is. And that's skilled and unskilled supply of labor. That's just the reality of the market right now. And something we continue to try to meet people where they're at as far as those opportunities. So as far as community strengths, that was an opportunity for respondents to pick a couple. And the most commonly selected ones are positive community leadership, which you guys are here today, right? Representing that, positive business climate, and then positive quality of life. So now we jump into the product section. We had a big increase in the new capabilities of introducing new capabilities and products in the last 3 years. 42% said yes. 37% said that they were anticipating in the next 2 years. So this is actually quite a significant jump from 2021, which we'll continue to talk about as we jump into this industry 4.0 section. So are you considering automation to address the current labor shortage? We had 52% say yes. And then 34% said that they are either implementing or have implemented technology into their operations or production. So how this led this products and industry 4.0, we see these as a combination of the two. We saw that, like I said, that big increase in products capabilities introduced. That was a 19% increase from the previous year. And then previously on that product section, we saw a 35% increase on an anticipated new product or new service as well. So we were able to partner with 4 Marion manufacturers to secure $1.125 million from the Iowa Economic Development Authority's Manufacturing 4.0 grant program. So this provided financial resources for companies to invest in technology and increase their efficiencies. So we'll continue to advocate for programs like that, and then also do our part to help them get those applications completed and cross those T's, dot those I's. So we're excited about that movement towards the new technology adoption. So something that we noticed last year was around succession planning. We saw a big note of saying, no, we do not have a formal plan for succession with our business. Yes, my son's in the business, he's going to take it over. Okay, well, have you had that conversation? Is there a paper plan in place? We saw that same issue this year as well. To respond to that within the last year, within our space, we've been able to host a quarterly event that we have named Business Founders. So we bring in our business owners and our top management. We provide more of a roundtable environment for them to establish new community connections, to also learn about succession tools. We were able to bring actually a couple of our local partners who are employee stock ownership plans or ESOPs, and they were able to talk about that process and the benefit of that. So we'll continue to meet with these folks and provide them opportunities to make those local connections. So now jumping into sales and facility needs, we saw the majority of our respondents see sales increase in 2022. And then also on top of that, we saw about 30% say that they are looking to either expand or modernize their facilities in the next 3 years. Again, a lot of this is around the adding automation and technology into their processes, but also as the new worker and where they're working and how they're working has changed as well the last few years. A lot of the modernization aspect of that was related to trying to assist with employees and provide them different options of working. So supply chain, 90% are still experiencing some type of challenge or issue with their logistics. A lot of that has been more around lead times and the freight and fuel costs that we continue to see challenge this environment. This has made profit margins a little bit compressed, especially going into the end of the year here. So we're continuing to try to figure out ways that we can continue to bring resources and options for our local business community in that regard. But just again, it's challenging both manufacturers and developers in completing projects. And obviously we've seen that right next door, right? So we'll continue again to try to provide different resources that we can to our local group. So the majority of this report is around workforce. As we know, that's been the number one issue we continue to have conversations around. So just to point out some themes that we continue to see, about 50% of our respondents have a remote or hybrid workforce of full-time employees. Again, about 43% are saying that they continue to see that workforce increasing. One thing that we were happy to hear is about 98% said that their current staffing level is the same January 2020, which was pre-COVID. And I would argue that of that 98%, 100% would actually have a higher workforce number than they did pre-COVID. So some more workforce themes here. Obviously, we're all about trying to make sure that we're making ourselves attractive for hiring workers from outside the region. And it shows. 96% said yes, it is Marion is attractive for hiring workers. 63% of respondents are doing some type of work-based learning, whether that be internships, apprenticeships, or co-op positions. And then the other fact is that we've seen companies introduce new programs or incentives in the current year to retain their existing workforce. A lot of that was around wages and around benefit offerings, whether that is bumping up those offerings or looking at new offerings that they could, particularly in the benefit space. So recruitment problems, 89% said yes. That continues to be all across the board from our entry-level folks. But this year, one thing that I did notice was the thought towards more professional, experienced folks. So like a CPA firm or someone looking for maybe a CFO controller type of position, even looking at PEs, professional engineers. So just more of those experienced folks to come in and train all these and help lead this new group of folks that they've continued to hire over the years. But with the new early retirements from coming out of COVID, we've seen that as a position of need really pick up. So this next question is around if you are looking to hire beyond unfilled positions in the next year. So looking at 2023, 20% said yes, that they would look at looking at hiring beyond unfilled positions. And then 77% said yes, we are doing some type of enhancement training to increase the capabilities of our employees. A lot of this was around tuition reimbursement. We also saw some new creative ways to provide opportunities for upskilling their employees. So beyond the BRE work that we did in person visiting with folks, we actually did send out a year-end job survey to get a better idea of the amount of jobs that we were able to add with our local business partners here. And did your company add a new job in 2022? And a new job excludes hiring a replacement for an existing job. So you are truly adding to your team. We had 77% say yes. And of those who said yes, 78% said that job met the definition, the state of Iowa's definition of what's called a high quality job, which is a starting wage of $24.20 or higher or equivalent when benefits are factored into compensation. So we've seen strong sales increases that have led to this competitive hiring environment, which has resulted in the addition of people at higher wages and benefit levels. And we've continued to see that with these results as well. So some of the themes, just I know I've harped on a couple of these, but just to add a little bit of kind of an end note here, that resources are being shifted towards retaining and upskilling versus adding to teams going into 2023. Lead times continue to have a major impact on the completion of products and projects, and those freight and fuel costs in particular, combined with our other inflationary pressures, are compressing final profit margins. And again, the succession planning is huge. We continue to figure out opportunities there, but as local business owners grow, we understand that that planning is critically important to support the long-term retention of our local business community. That was honestly brought up 2021. We've continued to try to meet that in 2022 as well, seeing that need, and we'll continue to plan and see how we can help in that regard. I'll throw it over to Emily here to hop into our community promise and other additions there. So thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm Emily Russ, and I am the Workforce and Communications Manager at Medco. And one of the programs I oversee is Community Promise, which is our initiative to connect local students with resources and pathways to pursue careers here in our community. So this dashboard that you all have in front of you is an overview of some of the things that we like to track every year. The first being their post-secondary intent on training. So that is their 2- and 4-year plans on going on beyond high school to 2- and 4-year training. And then down below are the additional pathways over the course of the past couple of years. This next percentage is an accumulation of all of the work-based learning opportunities that students are presented, freshmen through seniors in high school between both of our districts here in Marion. And you can see some of those activities that are accounted for. This is as of the last school year, and it will be accounted again here in at the end of this next school year. And I believe it will increase quite a bit. And I'll share about in a little bit our venture program, and the students involved in that has increased quite a bit. This next slide is just a little bit about our community build program. The current home on 3rd Avenue and 20th Street is wrapping up. The photos here are showing students getting to do a little bit of everything. They did landscaping, they built a new garage, did some siding, got to see a driveway be poured and some other things. So that's really neat to see them get to do some hands-on work. Additionally, we've also gotten to bring in a couple of folks that have done some hands-on work into the classroom to share with students their career pathways as well, and a little bit that goes into making those decisions and pursuing those careers. Next is a partnership update with Mercy Medical Center. In this past year, we've shared about before our employer innovation grant that we had received. That was a grant that supported our partnership with the hospital, and it made it possible for those students from Marion High School to receive their certified nursing assistant license. That grant also gave them the funds in order to drive to the hospital and then also to purchase their scrubs. This past week, you may have seen that we launched our next round of students participating in this program and took them to the hospital, and they got to tour a variety of different areas. And then last is our partnership with Venture. We connected them with 26 of our partners, and they've gotten to do a variety of different opportunities and working with businesses in our community. And they actually presented their year-end pitch in our space earlier this morning. And so it was busy. It was buzzing in our office this morning. And so it's been neat to see that program grow. That was very quick, but any question?
So kind of a quick overview of lots of different things that happened in 2022. Brady's giving you a hard copy of the report that he just reviewed that has a little bit more context included. But again, we wrap up by saying thank you for your partnership and your continued support to allow this work to happen, and happy to entertain any quick questions that you might have.
Okay, thanks to all of you. Any questions?
Just a comment.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, one question, actually. I'm glad to see. First of all, I think Medco has been playing a role that some of the school counselors have not been doing as strong of a job over the past number of years as they should. Because I've always felt for a very long time that the counselors at the schools really push the students towards four-year degrees. And there are so many other opportunities out there for two-year degrees or even not having a two-year degree. So, but one of the aspects I think that's important, and I'm not sure if you touched upon this directly, but one of the things you talked about in the past that's important to me anyway, is getting the students familiar with the types of jobs that are available to the businesses in this area. I mean, you can drive by a business and you have no idea what they do or the kind of jobs they do, but there's a lot of high-tech jobs available around here for either a two-year degree or four-year degree or not. So is that emphasis still there, or how are you making that connection?
Yep, absolutely. Pre-COVID, and we're working on a new strategy to get back in the classrooms now. It's hard to hit all the kids because there's a lot of kids in this community. So we're developing some fresh curriculum together with the schools. So this is what we do. We work with all of the students that go through this high school prep class. That usually happens in 8th grade. Students nowadays are being asked to make a lot of decisions at a really young age about just kind of an initial thought on a career pathway. So part of this exercise is we have an interface in our Community Promise website with some tools from Future Ready Iowa. They go through these assessments. And, you know, kids take all kinds of these assessments, right? But one of them is we have integrated into our site. And then they get to the end of that, they have some recommendations. And what Emily has done over the last several years is then developed a database of real jobs, high demand jobs that companies in our community are typically always looking for that next lead for. And so we have a way to correlate their career results or suggestions, not back to any job that might exist anywhere in the country, but like we want to map them back to very specific jobs that exist at companies that they have maybe never heard of. So Emily works very closely with HR professionals of our local and somewhat regional at times business community to create these job profiles. And you could go out and find these right now. That's one way that we're trying to just help tell the story of these unique job opportunities and then equip them with opportunities to start learning more, maybe do a job shadow, maybe bring in a speaker, work with partners at Kirkwood Workplace Learning Connections. But yeah, really exposing them to these jobs that's something that's often frustrating when we know about all these really dynamic companies. And unless it's Collins Aerospace, these kids don't necessarily know these companies exist.
Okay, good.
Great.
Yeah, something that Brady mentioned that really resonated with me was the whole topic of succession planning. And I don't want to maybe dissect this a lot here this evening, but as I've thought about succession planning over time, a dimension of that is business continuity. A key leader has an issue that prevents them from performing that key role that they have in their small business. And so succession planning, I think, has a different dimension that might propel those who haven't thought about succession planning. This would be the catalyst to them doing it, about how do you continue the business if you lose some key personnel, and also to then transition that into long-term, 5 years from now, who's going to lead this? They're kind of the same question, but I think one has an urgency quotient to it that is would maybe be the starting point for somebody to engage the conversation.
That's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
I should probably know this, Nick, so my apologies. But under the parameters for Medco, do you have limits on who you will work with or not work with as far as office, industrial, like, are you wide open with any type of a job potential?
So we are
office?
not gauging, like in the job survey that we did, we would not touch retail. That's probably the only one that's very specifically excluded. And we don't necessarily, although there would be some service type jobs. I mean, if you think about the construction industry, financial services industry, those are partners that are very much heavily involved in the development side. So there's probably some of those jobs represented in the survey. And we do have some additional data that we can share for you on the new job survey. But the one thing it would exclude, it would not capture any retail type of jobs.
And so even outside of the survey, just in the general mission and or interactions, if I'm a dentist's office and I call you all and I say, call Marion and looking for a new location, that would provide them information, but it's not necessarily somebody you would be like walking through the buildings.
Right. So if a dentist, for instance, just since you raised that, if they were looking for a location to perhaps build a new practice, we have the database on sites. Sometimes we might reach out to like Mr. Hockett. We oftentimes will have a conversation of maybe a multifamily housing developer is looking for a piece of ground that's not on the market, that sometimes we'll work with the planning team to try and come up with some ideas. But if you use the dentist example, we would be happy to help support that particular company in finding a location similar to like a mixed use type project. We would get involved in helping to support the creation of that real estate, but we would have nothing to do in helping to support the retail tenants that might be involved in there. That's where Jill and Brooke and their team would really focus on that particular component. I can't remember the instance, but even a couple of weeks ago, we oftentimes will get referrals back and forth from each other on that type of regard. Retail is not our space. But if there's a location that we could help find, maybe on the new construction side, that site piece is where we would help to support that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you all.
Thanks.
Okay. Next item marked for discussion was under public safety. Otherwise, are there any items under administrative services that require discussion before we get to public safety? Go ahead, Steve.
A9.
A9.
So under A9, the information I'd like is, I see where the outline here is for PDCM. Can you give us a few comments on what are the attributes on why PDCM was selected? And then as well as the compensation structure, because I'm seeing here a fixed annual amount, and I'm more accustomed to insurance agents or brokers being paid on a commission basis by the insurance companies themselves. So if you can give us a little bit of background and information on that, I'd appreciate it.
I will go ahead and speak, and then I'll let Randy and Grant speak as well if you'd like. PDCM was ultimately a consensus among all of the selection committee members, primarily because their proposal was the best fit for Marion. One of the others spoke a lot about the workers' compensation and less about the general insurance side, where we see most of our opportunities for improvement. Ultimately, we felt like one of the entities was more mature than where we're at right now. That was kind of high level on what we talked about. The flat fee structure was actually one that we were actually seeking and proposing because of the disincentive it creates for our premium to increase year over year on a commission based. Obviously, if the premium increases, then your broker, your agent would get paid more money. So we had actually requested a flat fee and kind of left it open as far as how they might propose their pricing structure. And the one we've selected came with 36,000 per year as a flat fee. So they essentially waive their commission and get paid a flat fee. And I'll turn it over to Grant and Randy if you guys want to speak a little bit more why PDCM.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, from my perspective, first off, I would have to say, PCDM put forward a highly compliant proposal. And the other thing that was striking, at least in general with them, is I think to benchmark something that Leanne just said, they have a capacity to bring a personal series of contacts that aren't going to, they're going to represent the same level of capability and competency that the other two firms, True North and Holmes Murphy, they're extremely large. And so in terms of the size and sophistication and proximity to the personnel that we'll rely on, it was, at least in my view, PCDM was a good match at this point in time relative to the sophistication and maturity that we as a city enterprise have. And so that, coupled with, again, being a highly compliant proposal, they seem to be the best choice at this point in time.
To answer your question.
Thanks. Thank you.
Anything else prior to C1? Okay, Chief.
I thought I was gonna have to tap dance my way through that. Thanks, Leanne, for filling in for me on that. I wanted to come before you tonight to talk about our body camera program. Our contract, we have a 5-year contract with Axon. We're entering into our last year. We've got a payment coming up early part of 23 for $49,000 a year is what we've been paying. We've also got a server that we store our bulk data on, pictures, videos, crime scene photos and things like that, that needs to be replaced. We budgeted $30,000 to replace that this fiscal year. We found out that Axon has a program where we can upload that data into their system. It's a cloud-based system. So instead of replacing that server, we can use them as an add-on to our body cameras. They've also got another program where they do redaction. They use AI to do redaction on body camera footage that we release. We've seen about a tremendous increase in requests for body camera footage, both from attorneys and private citizens over the last about 18 months. Our records clerk, we've got one full-time and one part-time. Our full-time records clerk spends about 10 to 15% of her time redacting those videos because she physically has to watch every minute of it and then go in and physically blur things out. With this program, they use AI. It'll target computer screens, license plates, even an officer holding a report. It will automatically take that out. So it's going to save her quite a bit of time. The first year cost, we've got some credits coming back to us. The first year cost, if you guys approve this, would be $53,665. This year, which is about a $4,000 increase over what we actually budgeted. And then it goes up to $68,079 for the next 4 years after that. I think between the cost savings on the VidArray server and the time it's going to save our records clerk, I think it's a good investment. We were going to wind up having to renegotiate this anyway. You know, if it's like anything else, we were looking at probably a 10% increase if we just kept what we have, is my guess. So I think this is a good time to do it. And so that's why we brought it forward.
Okay, questions? Go ahead.
Chief, question. So what happens if in the future you don't use Axon anymore and you go to a new vendor for cameras and Axon is storing all of the video and everything on their cloud base? Is that,
Yeah.
how does that work?
We would have to port that over, but I think it's like a lot of the technology that we talked about. There's so much proprietary stuff now that goes along with this that I don't want to say you're locked in forever, but with all the ancillary equipment. So we've got a body camera contract. We've also got a car camera contract, and we've got our tasers all through Axon. But we've got download stations and there's antennas in the parking lot. So when the squad cars pull in, it automatically downloads the information into the system that we can review. It would be very expensive to replace that. With this new system, even with the third-party storage, we get unlimited data. We did have them, Terrell and I worked with them to try to see what it would cost. If we just went down to terabytes and it was actually more expensive. I don't understand why. I'm sure it's a business decision. That bit array server we have is right now, it's got 28 terabytes of information on it. We got 4 empty terabytes. And just so you know, a terabyte is about 200,000 5-minute songs is the equivalent of what a terabyte is. I always hear it. I never knew quite how big it was. So I kind of put it in perspective. So it's a lot.
It's a lot. Other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, Chief, you know, I asked my predictable question, data security and all of that. And I think Terrell has now learned that he best be prepared to just barrage me back with everything that they've done in terms of compliance standards and everything else. So thank you. I was very satisfied with the answer.
Good.
Another quick question. How long do you have to keep all these videos?
It depends. It depends on the crime. If it's a homicide, we have to keep them forever. Most of the stuff we're trying to get rid of after 2 years. If it's not a case, and because that's basically the statute on a civil matter. So if we don't file criminal charges, if it's just a simple traffic ticket, if we don't get a complaint about officers' behavior, if we don't have a criminal charge pending, and we don't get sued, we're trying to get rid of it after about 2 years, going through that. And there's some parameters we can put into the system, the way we mark it, what case numbers we put on and things like that.
So you're able to code it so that you can delete things on a
Right, it'll
coded
automatically,
basis.
yes, sir. It'll automatically go out.
Okay.
Some stuff we just have to keep. There's some cases we just have to keep forever.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thanks.
Chief Fagan, you got the next 4 items.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. Just wanted to bring 4 items to you this evening as a follow-up from our action plan a month ago. I was happy to send a message out to our department telling them to buckle up because we're digging in. A lot of excitement right now in the department, and I'm very pleased to see that. But as you can see, we're bringing 4 items this week. The first one is the community-driven strategic plan as a part of that action plan that we presented on November 15th. I'll come back to the bunker gear, the fire station alerting integration, a lot of talk about CAD integration previously as well. Remember, we talked about the station alerting with the 911 center, providing activation at the local fire stations for when they receive the call. And then also the CAD integration into our records management system. And what that does is that eliminates manual transcribing of data points into records to where that data is automatically coming across from the CAD. Coming back to the firefighter bunker gear, and these are essentially our firefighting suits that we wear, our personal protective equipment. This is a planned replacement. We replace these every 5 years. Each one of our firefighters has 2 sets for in case one becomes contaminated, that they can exchange into the other set of gear to wear to respond to the next call. So I'm happy to answer any questions about these 4 items that we're asking your approval for.
Questions?
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Remainder of page 3, there's nothing marked. Any items, any discussion? Questions? Page 3. All right, page 4, any item prior to the regular agenda? All right, under regular agenda, item A1 is marked for discussion. Lucas is here.
Good afternoon. I'm excited to be bringing the new and improved employee handbook forward. So the process that we've gone through, we've consolidated all staff feedback, department head feedback, work some out process improvements. We then sent it off to Tom Newkirk for a DEI perspective, incorporated his feedback, and then we sent it off to Lynch Dallas for legal review. And so when we got legal reviews back, we made some more updates just to tweak things here and there. We did have 6 policies that we just kind of wanted to highlight as part of this process for you. The first policy is the residency requirements policy. It was required that the majority of employees live within a 10-mile radius. We did take that out. The rationale being we will really broaden our candidate pool for recruiting. We're not going to be on such a limited proximity. And so this will really help us acquire the best talent. And then hopefully, if down the line, if we did want to incentivize people to Marion, we can have that conversation later. But right now, with the recruiting pool being so competitive, this helps us fill our positions faster. The employment overview, this was formerly known as the employment agreements. Honestly, we just added some employment classifications. We did remove language regarding the employment agreements regarding department heads. So that was an update that we've made. So I know that a big topic has been our comp time policy. So right now with this rendition, we did not make any updates. We are including the comp time policy and our compensation policy together as part of the compensation study. And so we're having Baker Tilly review this policy, incorporate it into their overall assessment of where our compensation and benefits are at, which we will then address spring 2023. And so when we make up those compensation policy adjustments, if any were to apply for the comp time policy, that's when our changes would happen. So for our tuition reimbursement policy, right now there's no 2-year commitment. So we wanted to add kind of, a reimbursement clause where employees are gonna stay for 2 years after we reimburse them. This is really just to help capitalize on the dollars putting forward to invest in our employees. And so if they do leave within the 2-year timeframe, anything within that 2-year timeframe, they'd have to pay back. I did want to mention our non-discrimination anti-harassment policy. There's been significant changes. However, there's nothing really major to note. We've really just updated it to more of a modern policy, added more inclusive language to help be all-encompassing to that policy. So just wanted to mention that we did add more inclusive language for the discrimination policy. And then the last policy that we did change was the holiday policy, specifically as it relates to our battalion chiefs. The battalion chiefs who are on shift, that work 2,920 hours a year. Right now, they do accrue the non-bargaining holiday rates. We did change that to match the union holiday schedule. This will primarily help out with compression issues and to make it a little more equitable since they are putting in those additional hours compared to the standard 2080 hours per year. So at this point, our next steps is going to include just implementation, rolling out to employees, and then where we want to go from here is to review this on a yearly basis. And so next year, it won't be as an extensive process. So hopefully next year will be a quick hit and go. So are there any questions?
Questions? Go ahead, Steve.
One quick one. Can you go back to the wording for the residency requirement? So under new proposed, you've got applicants and employees need to live in Iowa. I understand, and I read the handbook for that section, and I understand it read about the employees need to live in Iowa. But is that correct to say applicants need to live in Iowa?
So we did want to mention applicants only so I see your question. We did want to just we mainly wanted to make that update to help not deter people from applying. And so when we do talk to out-of-state applicants, we can say, hey, the expectation is to move to Iowa at some point. So that's mainly the update. So we didn't want to deter people from, if people want to live in Des Moines and they wanted to apply. So we did say just the state of Iowa.
That's fine, but employees need to live in Iowa covers that.
Yep.
applicants don't need to live in Iowa,
Yes.
only if they're hired.
No, that's a good point.
I mean, if somebody were to read that, it would come across.
Yeah.
I don't
Nope.
think the handbook says that, but your slide is saying that, and it might come across a little
Nope.
misleading.
100%. So the expectation that we'll put with the applicants is that they'll be expected to live in
Yes,
Iowa.
that
Good.
part I understand.
Yep. Good.
Okay,
Good.
thanks.
Good question.
Somewhat on the same theme. So clearly there are certain job functions that can be done remotely. And I guess the question is then if that's a requirement of a high quality employee to work remotely, that we would look to that opportunity. And then the sub question that I have is, and maybe this is a Terrell question, do we have sufficient technology provisions to allow those kinds of positions to work remotely in an unimpeded way?
So that's a great question. With this rendition, we did not approach the work from home policy. Right now, our policy is as needed or on a case by case basis. That's a huge conversation to have as far as long-term strategy goes. And so for this update, we didn't make that our primary focus to address. But we can definitely look into that for next year's rendition to help address that. Have more conversations regarding that long-term strategy that we're talking about.
Okay, so that all of that has to be further thought through and developed appropriately.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Lucas, is there a separate policy for firefighters?
This is the union contract. We might have a department policy for fire specific things.
Do we have on-call,
Chief, you might be able
on-call
to.
firefighters?
Yeah, so the contract with the firefighters union identifies specific holidays that are different than what has been identified in the city's
As
policy.
far as residency requirements,
The current residency requirement is the same as you're talking about for what's proposed.
yeah.
My understanding is that the proposed would be expanded to the state of Iowa as well.
So don't we have on-call firefighters? And how
Yep.
does that,
So when it relates to on-call for firefighters, police, and you asked me, the expectation would be that, hey, this may occur. We would expect you to come back in if called in. So we have employees that make accommodations to help meet that on-call requirement. And they've done this on their own. So we would just level set that expectation up front, saying, hey, this job does require to be on call. And on that on-call procedure, this is the expectation.
Lucas, if I can, Mayor. So when we were going through the review, when we looked at the radius, one of the things that we talked about is their ability to attract and retain. So the ability to attract, if we're only able to pull people from a smaller radius, we're discounting a whole group of other possibly qualified candidates. So as we've talked about, at least this last year, about the competitiveness of the employment market, that was one thing we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to compete with our peers. And then when we started talking about what is the appropriate radius, if at all, we actually started looking at some existing employees, and we already have cases where folks are living, Team Marion members are living beyond an hour, so well beyond the 10-mile radius. So it's already acting in practice, and a number of those are on-call folks, whether it's in the Parks Department or some other departments where they're expected to call in for like a snow emergency. This is not uncommon to have a larger residency requirement in municipal government, as long as folks understand that, one, if you are in an on-call position, you are expected to show up within the appropriate call-in timeframe. So you need to make sure that you've got those accommodations in place. And then just as it relates to the union contracts, the union contracts will address things specific to those unions, and then anything not covered by the union contract would be governed by the personnel manual.
thanks for that. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, thanks for all your work on this. This was a big lift. We understand that there's a lot in this, and a lot that needed to be updated. So appreciate all of that. We talked about it, I've talked about it a little bit, but I will say I have a little bit of concern on this one. And I brought it up, but I just kind of, I'm going to say it. I get it, but recruiting talent isn't always going to be in the situation we're in right now. So I feel like we've thrown this open and you can't pull it back in. I mean, we're never going to say to people, oh, oops, now we're going to have because people are going to be living wherever. That's my concern. I get it with certain positions and I get it with some of that, but I will just come back and say again, that our residents appreciate seeing those that are our city team out and about and at things and attending things and at the grocery stores and at the different places. We do as the council, we're there, obviously, but others as well, especially those who interact a lot with our citizens. So I understand where this is coming from, but I also really hate that I feel like we live here. You know, your neighbors are seeing things that are happening in the decisions and some of the things happening. You have a lot more conversations than when you are not here, except for when you are working. You are not interacting with people in the neighborhoods in the same way, in some cases, not all. So I get it where we're going, but I don't like to just think somebody else is thinking it, that I have concerns with this piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you'd like, we can make this just like a reoccurring point to talk about. Given our current climate, the recruiting pool is really competitive. And so if we were to make this update, this doesn't have to be the end all be all for now all of eternity. We do have the opportunity to revise it next year. You know, if the market does slow down and it gets to be a little bit more of an employer market again, we can certainly revisit it.
Do we know, what do some of our peer communities, our comparable communities do in this regard?
A lot of them do not have a radius. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but the majority do not have a radius or living requirement. I can get you the exact number.
Actually, this is something that residency requirements has been something that a lot of recruiting firms has advised municipalities to get away from going back at least 15 years. That's when that trend started to flip. I mean, Councilman Mentzer's points valid. On the flip side, though, you know, the ability to attract and recruit. I know of somebody recently in the profession that applied for a position in a northern Iowa community, a pretty big one, and made it to the final round before they were told that they have to live in the community, and they dropped out. Perfectly qualified, was willing to commute the 90 minutes that it took, was going to be there. And they said, once they said residency required, they dropped out. Perfectly qualified, would have done a great job. And unfortunately, that is what we are up against in today's climate. Lucas mentioned that, you know, with this policy, my expectation for our organization is once we get these policies in place, like our financial policy, the personnel policy, this becomes something that we standardize and we review every single year. It's part of our budget process. We're reviewing and updating to meet the trends and make sure that we're being adaptable to what's happening and how we best can position our community.
You know, in a way, we're sort of situated like school districts for employment in terms of where school district employees either choose to live or are required to live. I think, and I could see where they would have an identical set of problems that we do in some respects, but I appreciate your comments back to Council Member Mentzer in terms of you know, let's see how this goes, evaluate it, and then calibrate as the market may require. I guess that's what the upshot of your answer was.
And I mean, one thing that we did share, because we did run this through the subcommittee, and that's what Councilwoman Mentzer was referencing in terms of the comment that was provided. And one of the things that we did share during that conversation as well is that there are instances where folks that may not live will commute, will get tired of commuting will either make the decision to move or seek employment elsewhere. I mean, those are the realities. So.
Randy?
Thank you. I want to just say thank you, Lucas, to you and the team that were working on these handbooks, because these are critical and certainly out of date. One of the things I wanted to come back to the mayor's comment is currently our paid on call volunteer commitment is within a 15-minute radius. I would like to see that our language be consistent throughout. We all know that 15 miles or 15 minutes means two different things. We've got a number of city staff members that are outside of our jurisdiction and have had and asked for council exceptions being made. I would assume that those all would be revoked out of their files if we moved forward with that. But I as well too, I believe we're in a society today. I'm not thinking of working remotely as much as just people willing to commute a little bit further for a quality of life for working and employment. Some of those, yes, are essential. You know, fire and police, when we have first responders, their time is critical to reporting. To this stage, having worked on those scenes, we'll take any volunteer or any individual that'll show up whenever, because we can always plug them in based on when their arrival time is. So I would like to see personally our language cleaned up. We either go by miles or go by minutes. We've been learning about a lot of that on the airport study. 30 minutes and 30 miles, they mean two different things. And this is really relative to this, because I know we have a number of employees, but I think by broadening that brushstroke and opening up, I think that's a wonderful opportunity. And you know, highways are being opened up, and we can commute much quicker and more efficiently than what we have been over the years. So I think that's going to be a huge move for us. But thank you again for all the work that went into that.
Anyone else? Thank you,
Very cool.
Lucas.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions on the remainder of the items under administrative services? Public services? Ryan? Oh,
Okay, I'm actually, if I could, I'll
ahead.
start us out just before you start. Okay, Ben. We're kind of doing a little different this time with our public service facility in bringing Conlon to the table and presenting. Not only tonight will they present about all of the trade packages, but they'll also present and talk about how they're going to control risk management, quality control, talk about our schedule, cost control as well, and then get to the award recommendations. And then we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer as well. I do want to point out the trade packages. You know, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we're asking, that we will be asking council to approve on Thursday. And we have three packages that we're asking to reject, and Conlon will go through those individually so that we can talk about some of those intricacies of those trade packages that we would recommend for rejection. As I mentioned, we would have some conversation in regards to the overhead door as well with the allowance package that was built into that trade. So we'll have Ben and Roy that will present that for us tonight.
Well,
Go
thank
ahead,
you.
Ben.
So yes, fundamentally, we are here to talk about the approval of a lot of these packages, but we did feel it was a good time just to get introduced to everybody, give everybody on the team a chance to interact a little bit with the council, because I think you'll be seeing them throughout the balance of the project. So do appreciate time on a fairly lengthy agenda tonight, so I'll try to speak as quickly as I can here. Quick intro for Conlon Construction. We are a 120-year-old firm based here in Eastern Iowa. Head office is in Dubuque. We do have an office here in Coralville, do a lot of work throughout Eastern Iowa, throughout Western Iowa. We also have a national presence where we complete a lot of work for large retail manufacturers such as Target And we have employees spread out throughout the country, actually. Tonight, as Kim mentioned, we were going to give just an overview of our philosophy here on risk management, which I know is a very sensitive topic right now for the city and properly executing these projects. Brandon Fairbanks, many of you may know, Senior Superintendent for us, will talk a little bit about quality control and actions that we'll take on site to ensure that we are holding everybody accountable and that we ensure that things are built to plan and spec. Matt Buckley will introduce himself and talk a little bit about schedule. Matt will be really the operational project manager as we go forward. And we'll kind of give a good overview of what to expect in the coming year, as well as how we'll manage that on site from a short-term look ahead to a long-term look ahead. And then Rory Weeble will talk a little bit about cost control and do kind of an overview of the bids that we received on December 8th and what the staff recommendations are from that and some of those discussions that we've had going into the results of that. So fundamentally, from a risk management standpoint, we really try to take a very proactive, engaged approach to projects. We try to start this at the very beginning right now while we are issuing the contracts and writing the work scopes. We're establishing schedule expectations. We're trying to be very finite about the type of work that is being completed. So trying to define work scopes very accurately and really giving us the ability to hold people accountable for their obligations to that contract, to the city, to the documents that they've been contracted against. So this is something that, you know, our job is to kind of plug those holes and to seam all of these different contracts together to ensure that we've got a good overall scope of work that is inclusive of everything that fundamentally needs to be completed to do the project. One item that has come up a lot is the concept of a notice to cure and how that applies to that. So, you know, we try to tie the two together in that we try to set milestones along the project that are attainable, and we hold our contractors accountable for performing, you know, to those attainable milestones. If intervention is needed, we do have those contractual mechanisms that allow us to interject, to call foul, so to speak, and to potentially supplement crews, supplement other contractors, bring other resources into the project that any individual contractor may not be able to complete on their own. So sometimes that takes a push. And importantly, we're not afraid to do that. You know, we really do want to make sure that everybody fundamentally performs to everything that they're obligated to perform. And we do insert ourselves into those situations to ensure performance. Another strategy we use to do that is the use of a procurement log. So right now we're in a very unstable time with the supply chain, and what we can do is establish very early on what the anticipated lead time is for a product to ensure that purchase orders go out the door, that there's an acceptance and acknowledgement of that from a manufacturer or from a supplier, that the assumptions that have been made in either our schedule or in the subcontractor schedule are in line with what the feedback is from those folks that they're actually contracting with. So it's again, a proactive method to try to get some feedback from those that are outside of that project team that allow us to get better visibility to what we might expect. So fundamentally trying to reduce unpredictability, trying to create as much information and data as we can going into it, and really trying to get that feedback from the larger project team, so to speak. And then, of course, contingency management, change management. Here again, to the concept of a very narrowly defined work scope, we try to be very careful to assign a contingency that's commensurate with the work that's related to that work scope. And to try to ensure that, if there are scope changes that need to be made, that they are within the contingency that may have been assigned to the project. And that we are managing that as a whole, looking at the future work that is yet to be completed. And to ensure that any potential issues that may come up, and unforeseen conditions that may unveil themselves, to ensure that there's an adequate contingency later on in the project to cover some of those types of expenses. That, I will hand it to Brandon to talk about quality control.
Hello, everyone. In your packet, one of the first things you'll see is a first work order, which I'll explain here in a minute. Our first work review, it actually starts before the contractors get to the site. Anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks before a contractor is going to be on site, we invite them out and we have a pre-construction meeting with them. We set the expectations. We go through their contract, their scope, make sure everybody's on board, everybody's ready to go. They've got all their materials set, and then on day one, they can start. And as you can see by the picture there, we do have precast. So that is an actual aerial view that we took. It was last week. We do have the precast set on the office section of the building. So before that contractor began their work, we did a pre-install, and then as they actually begin the work, we go through this, or I go through this. This is my paperwork to fill out. They start their work. I'm looking at, do they have the right certifications for welding? Do they have the right safety gear? Do they have the right parts and pieces? And as you can look, it's pretty extensive. There's, I think, 5 pages to this. Not all of it is applicable to this project, but these are the checklists that we have once the work starts. We do it for cast in place concrete, the rebar install. We do it for framing. We do it for roofing. We do it for just about everything. So as each contractor comes on board, we have that. I should have gone that way. So then the next part of my job are the observation reports. Those are my daily logs. I'm looking at who was on site, how many people they had on site, where in the building were they working, and what were they working on. I document that on a daily basis and review, does that match the scope of the work? That all goes in. If something comes up, say a contractor backs a piece of equipment into a piece of precast, that goes into my daily log so I can note that, so that we put them on notice. Hey, you did this damage. We expect you to fix it, to pay for the cost to fix it. All that goes in. And then as part of the observation reports, that also includes inspections. The city inspectors are required to come out and inspect certain things. Rebar before it goes in, rough in inspection, framing inspections, all that stuff. We also have Shive Hattery on board to do special inspections. Things like welding of the precast panel. So as that precast went up, we set up a couple of different times for Shive Hattery to send out an inspector. He watched the installer and checked their welds to make sure that it was up to par and that they were doing it correctly, instead of waiting till it's all said and done and going, oh, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. We had it all inspected as we went. So then the last part of that is mock-ups. For anybody that's been to the site, you'll notice that there was a mock-up done previously. It's still sitting out there. That is the precast panels, and what the expectation was that, hey, when the actual panels come out, they're going to look like the mock-up. As we go forward, there may, and I didn't, actually I should have looked, but I didn't. I apologize for that, to see what mock-ups we had. But a lot of times it might be exterior walls. And is the sheeting on right? Is the waterproofing on right? Is the window flashed correctly? And then as part of that, we also do some in-place mock-ups. So the precast one is an actual panel that once it's done, it's going to get thrown away. It doesn't fit as part of the puzzle, piece to the puzzle. But framing inspections, sometimes we can do those as an in-place mock-up if there's something special. We do a short little section of wall, the inspectors all come out, take a look, and if they give it their blessing, then we can go ahead and just use that as part of the place. It's kind of a cost saving, time saving method of doing it, but it's a potential for us. So those are my responsibilities on the project. I'll hand it off to Matt now.
All right. All right, thanks for allowing us to present to you today. I'm Matt Buckley. I'll be the operations project manager for the project. Once we get going. I go to echo some of Ben's comments on accountability for the project. I think that's super critical in this project specifically. Like we said, that we're sensitive to some previous projects perhaps, but we want to start this off on a good strong note. And as we bring contractors in, that's going to be one thing that we hold them accountable to is schedule. There we go. So what we've got now, schedule is pretty common for all construction projects. I mean, I think one thing that sets us apart from some other projects or teams is we are taking a proactive approach to a lot of things, including schedule. So right now we've got a schedule that was published with the bid documents that all of the bidding contractors will be expected to adhere to by signing the contract. They're thus accepting the dates and durations that are included in our pre-construction schedule. So this will be expanded as we go. As you could see, probably not on the screen, but in the handouts in front of you, we've started with the bids that were received 2 weeks ago. We're coming into the rebids that we'll talk about here shortly in a couple next month. And then you'll get into in the spring is when we resume the necessary repairs to the concrete foundations. And then from there, it's about a 14-month projected build, be substantially complete in June of 24. What this schedule currently does not show is there's an opportunity for us, and Brandon might talk about that again, but there's an opportunity for us to get going quicker in the office area in which we've already erected some precast. So currently we've got that work all happening at one time with the main garage area, but like Brandon said, when we set the precast this month, and that will afford us more time to get going quicker. So schedule, as Ben said, really starts with our procurement log, and that's tied closely to our schedule. Procurement log it really identifies the pieces of the puzzle basically that's going to construct this building. It's the ingredients of the final piece. In interviewing some of the low successful bidders, we've identified already the long lead time items, and such as the air handling units, the switch gear, lighting fixtures. Some of these items are 52 weeks lead times at this point. So that's why, according to, go back, the early stages in our project is all of that procurement, the roofing procurement, mechanical, switch gear, things like that. So our work starts right now upon award of the contracts. So next is establishing milestones and communicate that in a point of time. What I'm referring to there is, as this schedule, as progress is made, the schedule is also updated. And we can tell at a moment's time a point in time where a contractor is and where he should be. And that goes back to the accountability stage where we can project and we can see where a contractor is at any given time and serve that notice and be proactive and in a non-passive way of managing the schedule. So lastly, I guess in your packet, we do have an example of the look ahead schedule. And again, this is something that Brandon,
Yeah, so at the back of the page, or the back of the pack, you'll see a short interval schedule is what I call it. It takes the big schedule, it breaks it down into smaller line items. So for example, on the big schedule, it says we might be hanging sheetrock. On my schedule, it's gonna tell you we're hanging sheetrock in the locker rooms, Office 101. I break it down into smaller pieces to better track how they're doing on their schedule. And then also it gives me a better sense of, are they meeting their schedule? And then we can also look at tracking crew sizes too. If we anticipate 8 people is necessary to hang sheetrock to get done, and I'm only seeing 4 per day, well, okay, that's going to tell me pretty quickly that I'm not going to meet the schedule because I only have half the crew. So that's the short interval schedule that you see in the back.
all right. And lastly is the external communications that Conlon's going to provide on the project. And that's going to be accomplished on several different ways. First of all, at a minimum, we intend to provide an executive summary, if you would, on where the project is, both schedule, progress, financial, quality, all the things that we're here to talk about today. We're gonna have an executive summaries on a monthly basis, along with working with Ryan's group on a weekly basis. There are some other tools that we're gonna use to communicate. It might be providing some updates for the In Focus update every interval that needs to happen. And I mean, really, lastly, it could be more of these in-person updates, whether that be on a quarterly basis or whatever to be determined later. But I guess the main focus here is we're here to communicate and maybe over communicate with both the council, the community, and the users. So the next thing would be to talk about who we're going to have as our team members in this project. So I'm going to turn it over to Rory.
Thank you. Good evening, Rory Weeble. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the project and specifically about cost control and the bid results that we've from the bid opening on December 8th. The cost control starts with everything that Brandon and Ben and Matt were talking about as far as schedule and communication and accountability. What that goes to really is us as the construction manager on behalf of the city, managing the expectations and mitigating the risk of the contracts that are in place. So this list here is an outline of the prime contracts for the project. As you can see, the first 5 are already previously awarded contracts. And then the balance of the 8 are what we're talking about tonight with the recent bid opening. So precast concrete, as I mentioned, was one that's awarded. The foundation modifications, the pre-engineered metal building, fire protection, geothermal. The recent bid packages included the building concrete. The building concrete package essentially includes everything within the limits of the building. That includes some structures inside the building for equipment foundations, trench drains that are internal to the building, and also a slab on grade system that is a very critical component of this facility. 120,000 square foot, lots of heavy traffic, and a radiant system that's in that floor. So a very important investment for the city in that package. The general construction package, that is inclusive of all the walls and framing and finishes such as ceilings, flooring, doors and hardware, windows, all of the general construction items. The roofing as a large package, being a 120,000 square foot facility, is a large and important package too, as this facility includes a hardened roof structure. And so that's inclusive of the roofing. Overhead doors, another package that on a facility like this, you have a total of 21 overhead doors. And so that's a big piece of what happens with those doors being open and closed very frequently. The mechanical package includes the plumbing, the heating, cooling, ventilation, and the controls that go with that system. Electrical package, which also includes the low voltage, some access control. And then we also have the site work and utilities package for exactly that, your grading and exterior utilities. And then the site concrete and paving, which would be everything external to the building, concrete and asphalt paving. So we want to pause here before we go into the bid results and see if there's any questions that relative to our philosophies and approach to the project.
Rachel, would you please note that prior to the beginning of the presentations, I turned over the meeting to the Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, can you discuss, you might have referred to it briefly, but I'm not sure I caught the entire part of it. Can you describe, you talked about some executive summaries that are going to be prepared perhaps on a monthly basis, but can you describe what I think is probably even more important than that? The kind of meetings that you're going to be having with city employees, city staff, how often, what kind of subjects you're going to be covering in that. Again, I think that is a critical area. I appreciate you keeping us updated, but to me, that is far more important that they're in the middle of this operation and building.
So fundamentally, there's two key meetings that happen weekly. One is one that as a construction manager, we have with the multiple trades as a coordination meeting that Brandon leads and Matt. And that's where, we're looking at the look ahead schedule that you have an example there. And making sure we're hitting project milestones and just discussing issues as they come up. And then we also have an OAC meeting, an owner, architect, contractor meeting. That's been about every 2 weeks during design. So that'll go to a frequency of weekly during construction so that we can be that conduit between all the trade contractors and the architect and city staff.
Some of the other things that aren't talked about specifically with the trade packages is really everything that we're talking about today. And not only progress or things that are coming up, but quality. That this is the opportunity to address quality on a weekly basis if things are falling short of the expectations. Schedule is a huge thing that we'll talk about every week, every meeting. That's when Brandon will complete that look ahead schedule with the input of all the other contractors. So it's a set agenda that that we go down, hit every line.
Yeah, Grant.
So one of the gaps in some recent projects, from my perspective, that created some problems is risk management integration across all of the trades, all of the construction that's going on. And I think your meetings that you just described are going to cover off on discussing emergent risks, discussing risks that have been pre-identified. I mean, you're operating in an environment now where part of it is just lead times for certain categories of materials. So can you give a little bit more context and texture relative to integration of risk management across all stakeholders that are delivering the total project, and just spend a moment or two talking a little bit how you're going to approach that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to back up a slide just so you can get a better picture. So as I said, this is representative of all the prime contracts that we will manage. And you're right. I mean, that's the important piece, right? How do we make sure these are all meshed and also held accountable, right? I mean, that's one of the things I think that happens on some of these projects is you may end up with a gap because somebody wasn't held accountable, right? Ideally, we have those gaps identified going into the bid phase. And we do that by one method is that we, in the bid documents, included a summary of multiple contracts. So what you will see in that summary is each one of these packages defined as what that scope of work is and how it would interact with specifically with others. Like an example would be the overhead doors and the electrical. The overhead door contractor is not the one that wires it up, but we make sure to spell it out that they're both responsible to connect those dots together. You know, that there is coordination that has to happen. We will facilitate that as a construction manager. But it's important that we marry all those up. So it goes back to the expectations and what's in the bid documents. And that summary of multiple contracts is one really important piece that we use kind of as the blueprint of meshing those together. That along with, as Matt mentioned, the schedule that's in the bid documents. And that's important because you know, it's something that the bidders bid to. I mean, there's no, they can't show up day one and say, well, yeah, I didn't say I could do it in 4 weeks. Well, that was the expectation of the bid document. So we need to have that conversation of how we can make these milestones and what adjustments they may have to make.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. I'll also add, Grant, in my short-term schedule, as contractors are doing their work, if, let's say, the framer gets behind, like, go back to the sheetrocker, I think is what I used before. If he gets behind by only showing 4 guys, there should have been 8. Within a week, I highlight that. I change the color of his work schedule to red. And what that indicates that everybody can see in that room is, okay, you're now the one that's holding up progression. So everybody that comes behind you, and it basically, it puts more pressure on them, says, hey, you need to step up. You're either working longer hours, increasing your crew size, working on the weekends to get back to that finish date, so that the electrician, the plumber, everybody else that comes behind, that lack of, you know, time management on their part doesn't fall to somebody else. So I'm holding them accountable and saying, hey, the reason is this, and now you've affected these next 4 contractors. So that's what shows up on my short interval schedule to kind of help facilitate and show where the holes are. I don't know if that makes a little bit more sense.
No, that does. So you're heat mapping emergent risk.
Yep.
And you're cascading that impact across the entire critical path.
Yep. So if a air handling unit didn't show up, that gets highlighted. Okay, can't connect my duct. I can't do my final connections for my electrician. And you know, you see that cascade of what's being affected.
So one last question that I have, because risk management is where it's at.
Mhm.
It affects everything. How are you, what actions are you taking to be predictive in the risk treatments that you're going to have to apply? And let's use the air handler as an example, the air handling unit. How do you keep track of its on-site availability in advance of its shipping? Is there any proactive activity to understand that, okay, now a delivery is going to be missed and you know that, say, 6 weeks early?
Yes.
So that you can adjust then the subsequent scheduling?
Yes. So we actively talk to that subsequent, our weekly coordination meetings. You know, we have a milestone, say air handling unit supposed to be on site 10/1, supposed to ship on 9/1, you know, in early July. You know, hey, I think we're looking at Brecky Mechanical, you know, are you still on time? Can you check with your subcontractor? We want to know the day that it's not going to be available, if that's the case, instead of finding out 2 months later and then, well, I don't know what we do. But if we find out on July 1 that it didn't ship, okay, what's the next, is it the July 7th? Is it, what is that date? What can we do to facilitate what needs to be changed? So yes, we constantly reach out to the subs. We have that conversation right now, almost, every day we talk to them. What are you looking at for your long lead time items? What are any potential, hazards you see, material that may be changing?
So if I put a summary label on it, you're doing predictive risk management with mitigation planning accordingly.
Yes.
Okay, that's music to my ears. Thank you.
I was just gonna add with our schedule as it's built throughout the project, we have actual line items in our schedule for fabrication. So for mechanical procurement, that would be extended to the different components of the mechanical systems, which might be the air handling unit, the exhaust fans, the radiant heat, anything like that. And that activity is actually updated every month. So on a 12-month fabrication, we're looking at it where it is at every point in time, 6 months out, 3 months out. So we're not coming up to 2 months out and then we realize a problem. So that's another tool in our kit we use.
Sarah, go ahead.
This is more of a comment, and Brandon, you sat down, so then you probably should stand up. But
I feel like I'm crowd.
no, and this is just a quick comment, but I guess I look at this with complete confidence, but I look at it because of you. For those that don't know, Brandon built the Y with us under budget and in the derecho, and took care of all of that project and all of the multitude of hiccups and issues that arose during that fine time. So I appreciate your leadership on this, and I have great trust in understanding. I actually kind of understand what you're talking about because I feel like I lived through some of these projects and these color-coded documents and all the different things that happened that we saw personally when we built the Y. So I look forward to you working on this project and being involved because it was a great experience that we had with the Y project under tough times. Thanks.
Randy? No? Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's move on. The next section.
Yeah, so. So the agenda B1, so we want to go through the bid opening that occurred on December 8th for the 8 packages, as previously mentioned, the electrical, mechanical, paving, roofing, overhead doors, general construction, civil, and concrete work. The first one here is the electrical package. As you can see, we had competitive numbers here. 2 of the 3 under the estimate. The mechanical package, both bidders came in under the estimate here as well. The paving package, not a big surprise to just see LL Pelling on here as with a large asphalt scope of work. That's usually they're the only ones that we see. Roofing, as I mentioned previously, was a nice large package. But was very, very competitive. T&K Roofing being the low bidder. The overhead door package, with Dan's overhead door being a low responsive. One thing I wanted to note on this package to understand is of the 21 doors, 15 of the doors that were identified and designed as kind of the high usage, high frequency doors were specified as a counterweight door. So being exactly that, a counterweight, so fundamentally different than your spring and coil garage door. It's kind of your good, better, best, that's your best. And so what we did is we included an allowance of $380,000 for the supply of those 15 doors. So there is an opportunity to reevaluate that as those doors are selected with the low bidder. They have translucent panels in them. to let natural light through. So you could get cost savings to reduce some of those to a solid panel door. And you could get cost savings to actually go to more of a traditional coil and spring style door. So that is to be noted that within this number is a $380,000 allowance to be reconciled with the low bidder. The civil package had one bidder that was over estimate. And at this time, we're working with staff and then with Shive Hattery as well to strategize some value engineering ideas to then put this package back out for rebid. Same process that we're doing for the concrete package with one bidder is also strategizing some VE items. But also keeping in mind what I said earlier about the importance of that slab on grade. Kind of like the doors, we've kind of have a good, better, best. We've got best right now. And that's something to look at. And that's one of the things that the final bid documents had some things that were premium to the estimate. And that's why we're seeing some discrepancy. That and along with just having one bidder. One of the premiums was a waterproofing additive to the concrete. We found out post bid that was something that some of the other bidders didn't feel comfortable taking the risk of that concrete with that additive. So that's one of the things we're evaluating and making sure it's in the right places and making this an attractive package when it goes out for rebid. The general construction package, two bidders here. The difference here with the estimate was kind of a conglomerate of numerous things. We saw increases in there's vehicle lifts that were in this number, that cost came in higher than expected. The painting scope of this building, being a large garage, painting walls and ceilings. Again, back to the good, better, best. Right now it's best. And so we're looking at that to see, what makes, is there some strategies there to minimize that cost? Doors and hardware, aluminum windows, all of those contributed to the pricing that we received on bid day. I think that's our last slide.
Thank you. So let's go back and so the B2, just to clarify, so on the agenda anyway. So those 5 resolutions and those bids, staff's recommending approving all those, correct? I don't know if we're asking staff. Okay, Ryan.
So with the 5 packages, we are recommending approval. So that will be one motion for the council consideration on Thursday. So we're comfortable with those bid packages. The other 3 bid packages, those will be under a different motion. And the staff's recommendation is to reject those bids, do some value engineering and get those back out on the street early in January for a rebid.
Will, sorry.
Yes.
If it helps, the way we're going to have that on Wednesdays, there will be a note to the side of each motion, which ones we're recommending approval, which ones we're recommending denial. So the ones that we're recommending denial, you would just vote against. And then we will have a separate resolution, assuming that you follow staff recommendation, that will reject those bid packages and authorize a rebid.
And that would be for the B3 and B4,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, for our next agenda, B4 will actually get put onto the list with B3.
Yeah. Okay.
We just had already published before that decision was made.
We have questions on. Yes, Steve.
Yeah. With other projects that you have been working on in the last 12 to 18 months, how much did it surprise you by the magnitude of those 3 bid packages for civil, concrete, and general construction that the quote or the amounts you received from the contractors were so much above the engineer's estimate. I mean, we've seen bids in here 10, 20, 30%, but you're talking on these magnitudes of 70 to 100%. So have you been seeing bid differences of magnitudes like that in the past 12 to 18 months, or is this something different?
We have seen, volatility in like the aluminum market. That's one that seems to be pretty volatile. Concrete's one that we've gotten a lot of feedback that turning the corner next year, the ready mix prices are going up. Specific to your point on the engineer's estimate, I think some of that is reflective that we learned in that the estimate and the final bid documents, there were some premiums in the final bid documents that painted that picture a little bit. So those are some of the strategies that we're identifying and kind of back to, the good, better, best, we can put these things into, it's ultimately, it's a balance of your investment, how much do you want to invest into this? But to answer your question, I don't think, we looked at it more in totality of all the bids. And that was a little bit more than we would have expected. But we were very satisfied also with the mechanical electrical numbers, and that's one that has been a challenge over the last 12 to 18 months. And I think that's one to focus on too, because those are where your long lead items are right now. And so if to be able to get those going while we work on some of the items that are more paint and finishes that aren't as hard to get, that we can quantify and see about, there's might be opportunities to change a concrete block wall to a drywall wall. I mean, we all know the durability difference, right? But it just comes down to usage and decision of where you want to invest that money.
Well, the three we're going to reject have almost a total of $4 million difference. So yeah, you can talk about some of these others that came in a little bit under, but they no way offset $4 million. And sometimes I look at that as I have a concern about how they were bid, what those specs were. And did you get a little way too overboard? Either you and or the architect. I've seen architects try to ask for the Taj Mahal, and it's going to cost for a Taj Mahal when we don't need the Taj Mahal. So, I'm really concerned that you're going to be able to come up with a significant change in that, and that the impact of this project is in dire jeopardy right from the get-go by a magnitude of millions. So I've got a lot of concern by that, as well as in each case, basically only one company bid. So, I think you've got a lot of work to do. You can talk about your value engineering, and I hope you do a bang-up job with that, because it's going to take a lot of work to get some more bids and get those dollars down. So good luck.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. Great.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback on that because I think we all understand too, past practices. We know that there's not only in our municipality, but a lot of municipalities bids went out, projects were delayed, projects went on, and a lot of things came way overpriced. Do you feel that any of these, in your experience, you're working with these, you're seeing other bids coming in, you see what should be comparables? Are you feeling or seeing any of these might be padded just a bit as you're going through these trades and seeing where some of these numbers are coming into play? I mean, we all know, right? New construction is $100 per outlet on a 110 service. So we got a good rule of thumb where we know these numbers should be coming in. I'm just wondering if there's a little insurance being padded in these numbers. And I'm not condemning anybody to say that they should or shouldn't be, but I'm just curious because this is a huge project.
The three packages that we're looking at, the one that's up on right now, you have the luxury of having two bids, right? So the other two packages, we don't have a luxury of having another bid to compare to. As we dove into the scope, it didn't seem highly inappropriate for the scope that was bid. Now, I think as we strategize to alter that scope and put it back out in an attractive fashion that we hope to see more than one bid of each package and get into more of a competitive environment so that we're, you know, you have that transparency and comfort of what those bids are.
Thank you.
Yep.
No one else? Okay.
One more question.
Yes.
Another thing that a lot of times affects the types of bids that come in is the number of projects that are out there. Okay, so I guess that's also a good question or clarification to get, because sometimes if there's a lot of projects out there, these companies aren't that hungry, or if they're going to bid on them, they're going to bid them high, and if they get it, they're going to be really happy with it. So are there a lot of projects out there that is causing these high bids or only one bidder, that some of these other companies are not even submitting bids? Is that an impact or not?
That is some of the feedback, correct? Yeah, and so we felt that with the calendar of the project, you know, they have some time out there.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the keys, right? The earlier you can bid it before a contractor starts to fill up, the better off we are with the numbers we get. So that is something. Also, the bid calendars, that it's always difficult. I mean, we put ours out for bid and then somebody else might put one out same day later. We try to keep aware of that and make adjustments if need be, because we don't want to miss out on somebody that's that contractors that are looking at other jobs. So that is a balance that we'll look at as well here. So as our goal right now is to turn around and then rebid in January and try to, you know, grab everyone before it gets, you know, down the road, spring, summer.
One more quick question. When you have to go out for these rebids, do you anticipate that's going to impact the schedule that you have showing us right now?
No, we don't. And like I said, I think the key there is that the mechanical and the electrical equipment, those packages contain the lead times that we're hearing of up to a year on some switchgear and but for ready mix, block, rebar, not too concerned there, no.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank you.
all of that. And I will turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you. Anything to discuss on F1 or F2? F3, Dave?
All right, the first item here is a motion to accept Yorkshire Court and detention basins associated with the potential replat of the coast of English Glen. This is kind of a unique request. I don't recall it ever having to be done this way. Essentially, the applicant is looking for some assurances if he replats the property that the city will take on an existing private street and a private detention basin. Obviously, he doesn't want the expense of replatting the property if it's just a no-go right off the bat. So we're basically looking for, I guess he's looking for some assurances before he proceeds with spending some real dollars on a project that may not happen. This original plat was approved in 2006. It's probably one of our oldest unfinished plats in the city with this volume of lots. This is just right north of that senior home off English Glen and 35th Avenue. So essentially, what they are looking for is to dedicate or have the city council accept Yorkshire Court, which is shown as A, it's a private street, and then accept the public detention or accept the private basin shown, or basically B is it's a wet basin. When staff reviewed the request, several items came up. The first item, and there's a rough plat he had actually prepared for. It's not near complete, but it's a good concept plan. We sent this over to the Public Works or Public Service Board, and they did a quick review back in, I believe it was the November meeting. And ultimately, the board did recommend denial of the request. They had a lot of issues with snow removal and then just some general concerns about the Yorkshire Court, how it was constructed, widths, et cetera. I've laid out all the requirements for a public street in the city next to what is actually there today. So as you can see, it doesn't quite meet city code on several key metrics. If you'd like more information on that, I can sure turn that over to Mike and he can go into great depth of why we have all the requirements we have. The second request was for a detention basin. The detention basin, again, which was highlighted in portion B there. This is a wet basin, means it holds, retains water like a pond. It's not a very big one. Based on past council practices, we've not been willing to accept wet basins. So we're just kind of continuing with that recommendation as well. It's a wet basin. Past practice has not indicated a desire to accept them. So this is a motion in the affirmative, of course, to accept or to commit to accepting these improvements, these existing improvements on Thursday. We are recommending, again, denial of both. We kind of, I've indicated that to the applicant that this is a big ask of the city to take on a substandard street with a lot of future unknowns in terms of maintenance, the ability to provide services to it, as well as just the past practice of not accepting wet basins. We are recommending denial of both requests as part of this motion. Any questions?
Questions? Thanks, Dave.
Okay.
You have the next one.
All right, this will be a resolution of approval for the central quarter review of the Burger King located on 7th Avenue. I think everybody's familiar with it. They're looking at a redevelopment of this, I should say redevelopment of the site, a remodel of the site now to reflect current franchise requirements for buildings. So this will be a extensive remodel. Initially, it was going to be a complete removal and reconstruction of the site. Now it's just going to be a remodel of the building. The building elevations I'll show in a second do meet and exceed the corridor design requirements. The site plan I'll be illustrating. Not really much of a site plan, nothing changes. Some slight modifications to the building, and then really maintenance on the parking lot instead of complete reconstruction. So site plan illustrated, no significant changes. Just a little bit of work on the front, the open patio area. They have that little pedestrian area or outdoor eating area. Other than that, footprint remains the same, plus or minus a few feet here and there to accommodate some new openings. At this time, there's no access as part of this request onto 6th Avenue. Something they had brought to us early on. I think we thought it was gone away, but it looks like that's going to come back. So we're going to be facilitating some discussions with not just Burger King, but some of the other folks on this block to discuss a potential access onto 6th Avenue. If you go out there today, there is a curb cut out there kind of behind Linco and O'Reilly's in that general area for a frontage road. So we're going to try to get those folks in and just discuss the options going forward and make sure they understand the benefits and the pros and cons, I guess, of an access on the 6th Avenue. I know landscape may come up as a question. They're really not altering it other than doing just some general maintenance on the parking lot. They're not moving the parking lot. It's all where it is today. So it's basically up to the existing property line, more or less. Unfortunately, there's not enough opportunity to create any landscaping, meaningful landscaping in that area. We're going to look at a few options with them to see what we can do. But the back of that curb is within a foot or two of the property line. So we might look at some additional landscaping onto the city portion. There's a lot of excess right of way in that location. So we can see if we can work out some landscaping in that area, mostly trees. I'll have to coordinate that with the Parks Department to make sure the arborist is okay with what we're going to be looking at. So they're not illustrated on this plan because they're not part of the project yet, but hopefully we can accommodate some additional ones as we move forward. Building elevations, like I had said, they meet and exceed all the design requirements. It's predominantly two materials, brick, and then a Nichi-Ha product, which is a cement panel. Best example would be Dunkin' Donuts here in town. It's a Nichiha product. Nichiha is a specific product, but it's basically a cement board, cement panels. So you can see by the elevations, it's a complete new store essentially. A little more modern, a little more urban. It does reflect, again, the franchise requirements. All four-sided design. With any building, you do have a service side of the building, and that is on the 6th Avenue side. All right there. This is the existing location for the dumpster and some of the other equipment handled in that area. That'll all be rescreened with new structural elements as well as landscaping in that area. So you won't see as much of the back of the building as you do today. And they did provide a kind of a color photorealistic image of the site. So you again see the materials in color. And again, this does meet and exceed the central corridor design requirements. Any questions? Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this, subject to the removal of these are 3 signboards in this location. The applicant was more than happy to get rid of them. He doesn't want them either. It's just a franchise requirement, but if they don't have to be there, they don't have to be there. So that was a recommendation of approval.
Two things. Are they remodeling inside too?
Yes.
Okay, and then let's go back to the 6th Avenue access that you were talking about.
Okay.
I was gonna ask you about it, from reading the report. So that frontage road, would it, if it were to come in behind Linco there and come over into the Burger King parking lot, does it end there? The frontage road?
Yeah, this frontage road, if it goes to where it is curved in today, and if you go home or come in that way, go look at it, behind Lincoln and O'Reilly, it'll extend through the Lincoln property and go into the parking lot of Burger King, and then it's basically ends.
Okay.
The car wash gets its access from the easement we already have on the Levita site. So then the other frontage road will go west along the backside in some manner of O'Reilly, and it basically terminates at the O'Reilly property. So then they can develop their own driveway or parking lot in that area.
Okay.
If it gets moved into a location, maybe more behind Linco and Burger King, or more into the Burger King property itself, it'll be the only one. We'd probably have to look at some sort of control raised median in this area, so cars aren't stacking back onto 6. So they have to kind of force them up into the parking lot and then back down into the drive-through to meet some of those drive-through standards that was adopted a couple months ago.
So the access would have to potentially move if the other businesses to the west are not interested.
We'd have to study it. They have a concept of that in. We haven't reviewed it fully yet. There's a storm intake in there we'd have to contend with. So there's some obstacles.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, Dave, asking for a friend, when's this project gonna start? Do we know?
I think they'd like to start tomorrow if they could. It's a spring start.
Okay.
Was the goal.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay.
All right, thanks.
Dave. Kesha?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thursday will be, as I had emailed you, Thursday is going to be a bulk of a public hearing to discuss the community needs and housing, or community development housing needs assessment. And so those are some of the requirements of the Iowa Economic Development Authority. Today, I'm going to touch on and talk more about the projects themselves that have applied for Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery. So CDBG DR, if you ever hear me refer to DR projects, the Disaster Recovery Housing Funds. And so I'd like to touch base on those. A little bit of background on this. These are not necessarily monies coming from the city. These are applications going to the Iowa Economic Development Authority for housing dollars for a minimum of 51% of the units need to be housing specific for tenants that are 80% or less of the median income. for Marion, which is about 75,000 is typically median income. So you're looking at, that 65,000 income for that. So just a little bit of background on that. So the locations I had alluded to when we set the date for the public hearing, and these are kind of in order. Staff did kind of an informal ranking just to see what are some, if we're actually looking at these, how would we rank these? So the one that came out number one in the ranking, it's nothing of a make or break. The Hoth Flats is the northeast corner of 8th Avenue and 10th Street. So it's currently a parking lot. That's at the lower part of your screen. Number two is at the top part of the screen is the Ridge at Indian Creek. That is by Abode, that are owner occupied units. The Hoth Flats are rentals. The number three is Winslow House Senior Apartments. So the name says it all. I'll get into the details of each of these in a little bit. Number four is the Bell Tower Lofts, which is at the lower part of the screen, which is also known as the former Methodist Church. And the Goochmet properties, I will discuss that when we get to there. It was auxiliary dwelling units on 2 individual lots. So going back to describe a little more detail, the Hoth Flats, like I said, is at the northeast corner of 8th Avenue and 10th Street. It's 20 rental units, proposed to be 3 stories with first floor and underground parking. It kind of goes down as you go around in the structure. Currently zoned UTC 1, and so residential, all 3 stories is a compatible use. May require a variance for open space, but that will be kind of in the details as they would go forward with final plans. It will require central corridor review, but again, staff doesn't see anything overly concerning that would not warrant our recommendation for approval. And this is the opportunity that we had noted the applicants would have time to speak. I don't know if anybody's here to represent that one. Nope. Okay. Any questions of staff regarding this one? Okay. Moving on, the Ridge at Indian Creek second edition townhomes is, as you can see, it's 20 units, owner occupied. So these will be duplexes that will be sold, income verification when they're sold. And I think it's as simple as a lien on the property. Sorry, I'm looking back at Paula Mitchell with ECOG here. If there's any technical questions, Paul is our gal for answering. But it's a 15-year requirement on those to be that 80% LMI. It's already existing zoning for planned unit development. The final plat and the final site development plan have been approved by you. So it's kind of shovel ready. So again, staff does not have any concerns with this going forward to the state as a recommendation. Any questions on this one?
Let Mayor Pro Tem handle that.
Any questions? Nope. Grant?
I have some general program questions, so I'll just wait until the end.
Okay, Winslow House Senior Housing is proposed to be 26 rental units, 2 stories. It's a 55+ age restriction. This property is already zoned MR2, so it's compatible for multifamily zoning. The multifamily design standards, which are currently in play. I think the second reading for those will be on Thursday, but most likely when this would come back through, those would be in play. There's floodplain on the property, but again, the applicant has said, we're aware, we'll do what we need to do to make it in compliance with any floodplain regulations. So any questions on this one?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, so it's a 2-story senior. So is there is it internal, are those outside doors? I'm wondering about stairs. I'm wondering are those like two level units? Are they 2 stories where residents would go in and you have elevator access to the 2nd floor?
There is an internal door. It's not really illustrated on the plan very well, but there is exterior doors and there's an internal stairway as well.
Is there elevator?
I don't recall seeing that from the floor plans. I'm gonna say no, because of the first floor units, they can address probably most of the any handicap need.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious on this one. Why did they decide to do the 55 plus age restriction?
It's on the same property as the Winslow House Care
Right.
Facility. And so I think that they, in their application, they kind of note that they're trying to build this aging in place, aging in area.
Okay.
So, and again, I think it, some of it can go back to the, if one spouse needs additional care, the other one can be close by. So not just an individual, but as a whole.
Okay.
Bell tower, so sorry, going back again, staff has no or minimal concerns with this. So we would recommend going to the state with our recommendation of that one. The bell tower lofts, or the former Methodist church is referred to, is proposed to be 30 residential units, 3 stories tall. The current zoning is U1 zoning, which does not allow residential on the first floor. And so that would be something for council to consider, as far as, either whole scale zoning amendment would need to be made to allow residential on the first floor in all the U1, or it wouldn't be allowed. The other option is UTC1 zoning, which is right across the street, so it wouldn't necessarily be considered spot zoning. It permits residential on the first floor, however, it requires off-street parking. And so that's kind of the interesting take on this one as far as zoning compliance. And so, and it would require central corridor review, but again, that's not staff's main concern. So given the information provided, staff's unable to support the application or unable to recommend approval of it. But the applicant is here, a number of them, here and can speak to that. Are there any questions of staff first?
Grant, go ahead.
Well, this one actually, I think, is the right segue for my general question relative to the total program, but I did have some specific questions on this, and I understand the recommendation to not approve this. This structure is listed in the Marion Historic Commercial District registration for National Park Service Registry of Historical Places. And so I guess the question is, independent of whatever project goes on here, are there any requirements that registration places on any project that happens?
On this, my understanding of it, it is not an individually listed property. It's eligible to be individually listed. It is contributing to the Uptown Historic District. So it adds historical architectural value to the historic district. It is individually eligible to be listed on the National Register, but it is not individually listed. So it's a great structure that adds value to the Uptown District, but it's not individually listed. So if it was individually listed, there's a whole lot of requirements that can come with that. But because it's not, it doesn't have a lot of that extra review required.
Okay, that's a distinction I didn't detect in my own review of that.
The Presbyterian Church, for example, is individually listed on the National Register.
Okay. All right. That's a field I'm going to go plow again just to square off.
Please, it's a difficult one.
That's a useful highlight. So I would have to say this project as it stands sort of ran afoul of what I believed was our original conceptual use of that property. And I understand the constraints that the zoning places on it, hence the no recommendation. But now the general question I have about this entire program, independent of these properties, the part of the name of this program is Disaster Recovery Derecho Housing Program. And so my question is the objective of this program from a state perspective to replace housing that was lost or non-recoverable in the derecho?
Yes, I was gonna say, Paula, do you wanna?
Yes, broadly speaking, that is the intent of the program, and it's not necessarily to replace units in exactly the same place that they were lost, but to ensure that there is replacement housing in the market to ease market constraints because there was a loss of housing in the general market area.
Okay. So I guess on that basis, because there is a pre-contemplated development that's been underway for, let's say, 5 or 6 years, if that then can fundamentally be utilized to fill that gap of housing that was lost in the derecho, that makes pre-existing developments eligible to participate.
It would depend on the stage of development. So right now, where no choice limiting activities have taken place on that site, it would be eligible if the city chooses to support it.
Okay.
If the project had already started construction or taken some other action that made looking at other sites not viable, then that would not be eligible because of environmental review requirements for the program.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. That responds to the concern that was looming in the back of my mind. Thanks. Okay.
Randy.
Did we catch that? Could we go back to that very first unit? I believe it was 22 units located on 10th and 8th. Does that have? Okay, that would be complete underground parking. Would that be for all units then, or would there be still a need for off-site parking for those tenants?
It would be, so the residential to parking requirement would be 1.5. And so the applicant has shown 30 spaces within the structure. You can actually see a proposed garage door. Along 8th Avenue where that white vehicle is, right behind that, you can, oh, look at that. You can see the little hand. So right in there would be the garage, and then you would drive north and then west and then loop back around south. And then again, it goes down. And so this first floor, right where the pedestrian is, right behind there, there's proposed units in there as well, because again, part of the parking would be underground.
Okay, thank you.
And again, we haven't gotten into full review to verify parking stall widths, and there were lines enough to make it 30 spots.
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you can go back to the church. So it's my understanding that the proposed apartments on the east side of this structure have parking contained within that structure. Am I correct in that? I'm getting a head nod back there. Yes. So my question is there any future plan then to accommodate 30+ parking spaces for the people that will be in this proposed structure, other than putting them on the street where we already have uptown parking issue?
And I'm only talking to the plans for the units themselves that have been submitted. We have not seen anything parking related. but
Nothing there, right?
I'm sure the applicant would be more than happy to.
If they have a comment,
talk
I'd be
to
glad to hear it, because that's a major drawback to this proposal.
Any other questions of staff? And I will turn it over to.
Nope.
I'm assuming Brian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Presentation.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. I'll try to make it brief here. Should have brought Christmas cookies for everybody tonight since Conlon was going to be speaking all night. So thank you, everybody. And Grant, you bring up a great point about DR, disaster recovery. And as we all know, this church was decimated by the derecho. So just a quick presentation we put together on this, guys, because we understand everybody's concern for sure. So bear with me here. How it started, 1895, the church was built. 1896, it was opened. And then obviously in 2020 was when derecho hit with significant wind and water damage. It's listed on the Preservation Iowa's 2020 most endangered properties. Guys, this property is in significant danger, okay? Mayor Nick Abuasley determination and resolve would not allow the Marion's historic landmark to be demolished. So I'd like to go on record for sure tonight and recognize Mayor Abuasley's efforts to ultimately save this structure from being demolished 3 days before we were approached with it from Mayor Abuasley. Mayor Abuasley connected with Conlin Construction, who took ownership to avoid losing the structure only days before demolition. The site was secured with fencing, interior cleanup, mold remediation, and new roof tarps were secured in an effort to prevent significant ongoing deterioration of the building and its interior. I remember in April when we purchased it, and from the thaw from the winter, walking in there, and it was literally like a waterfall, guys. The water was draining in the facility. So we were able to remediate that and at least get it stabilized at the current time. Since then, we've marketed the church. We've continued to market it to potential restaurants, to potential restaurateurs that might be interested, breweries we brought through different commercial tenants. We talked to the various commercial real estate agents, as well as restaurant suppliers, just to get the feel of what's going on right now with that. And all the while we did that, we had to determine what the best use, and not only best use, but what's most financially feasible for the property. We had to understand the construction costs to restore. And I want everybody to understand from a commercial perspective, to bring this church back to life, just to bring it back to a gray box, if this was commercial, guys, would be about $3.1 million for a gray box, okay? We had to understand the market trends. Okay, right now in Uptown Marion, lease rates are anywhere from $14 to $16 a foot is what we're seeing typically, what typical lease rates going for, and even our newest tenants, and we've got some great ones in Uptown. And at $14 to $16 a foot, at a $3 million build out cost, and that's just to get it to a shell. That's before that restaurant would have to bring FF&E. That's a really large hurdle for any kind of restaurateur or brewery to handle. We did some math and it was right around $40 to $50 a foot is what you would need just to make it financially viable for an investor to do this project commercially. We also had to look at the bank financial feasibility and with interest rates rising and what could be done to ultimately save the church. 3 weeks ago, literally 3 weeks ago, we were brought to our attention about this community development block grant. And it was never the intention to even look at this sanctuary, if you will, as a residential housing opportunity. And we thought, what a great opportunity to look at this and see what this looks like to ultimately save the church and provide a structure that could be financially feasible to avoid the wrecking ball. So IEDA actually was so interested in this project, guys, as this deliverable, they came out and visited the project. This is about a week and a half ago. They came out and visited the project, 3 of them from IEDA from Des Moines, and they were extremely excited. They were overwhelmed with how to take an old historic structure, repurpose it, and keep the iconic landmark in the city of Marion. It was interesting. They talked about one in Tama that they were looking at right now, and Debbie Durham also talked about one in Waterloo. They have the same situation as this property, and they have no use for it, no idea what to use, how to repurpose it. They love the idea. So currently right now, what's being proposed is multifamily and 30 units. We've had some great meetings, some very passionate meetings with city staff, and Mayor Abuasley's been great to talk to about this, as is some other council members. And we're trying to incorporate some commercial as well on the art in the alleyway. And one of the great things about this program, I want to make sure everybody understands, is there's an infrastructure grant as well. And per unit, we're able to grab infrastructure dollars that would improve the art in the alleyway walk. So we'd be able to extend the art in the alleyway, as you can kind of see from this site plan a little bit, this yellow arrow extends the art in the alleyway down through the church The utilities get buried. We do pavers, we do different lighting aesthetics, what have you. This program would pay for that. Okay? It's extending your art in the alleyway walk. The goal of the project, guys, is to restore and preserve one of Marion's iconic historic landmarks and to honor the history of the church. Is units ideal for this facility? Of course it isn't. Okay? Does it save our community landmark in our community that we can see from miles away? Yes, it does. And it also provides a financial avenue that makes it a viable option to be bankable. And with this grant, unfortunately, there isn't other grants like this on the commercial side, or we'd be looking at that because this is a huge undertaking to save this church. It really is. Yes. Yes, thank you. One of the things that to mention here, I got off my notes a little bit, is we did reach out to the historic tax credit group through IEDA. And one of the reasons that really kind of put a damper in the commercial side is we weren't able to qualify for those credits. Something as simple as leveling the floor in the sanctuary that is sloped towards the front of the sanctuary that would disqualify the project. So you couldn't even level the floor in order to be able to qualify for historic tax credits. So that program was completely out the door at that point. So we were successful in getting a Brownfield Grayfield Award. We were not successful in getting a Workforce Housing Award. The next viable option to try to save the church was this Community Development Block Grant. And that's how we got here 3 weeks ago. So I wanted to really give people some content. Also to these units, just so everybody is aware, putting units in the church was derived from an idea, not from myself or Daryl High Properties, who's a partner on this, or an architect. It was actually derived from Main Street, Iowa. Main Street, Iowa sent out some options to Brooke Prouty that was, what could the church be, okay? And we did do a visioning session of what could the church possibly be, and a lot of things were thrown out. Great options is from breweries to condos to hotel. And one of the things that Main Street, Iowa brought up was units in the church. And this was done in Washington, DC. Maybe I wish I would have had it on the slide tonight, but maybe Google it yourselves, where they took an old historic church really similar to this, and they turned it into just beautiful units, incorporating a lot of the historic values of the old church into the new and keeping a historic structure alive. This is going to be something we're going to continue to see in a lot of the communities, and how we repurpose them is going to be really critical to saving some of these structures. So the next slide I had here was some updated renderings that Kyle Martin at Martin Gardner Architects had designed for unit renderings. And you'll see we did try to incorporate some commercial space, which we're continuing to try to look at. But right now it's slated for 30 units. I think it was Randy, you had the question about parking. The new building we had with the new side of the church, that would incorporate the parking underneath there. For this particular project, we would need some parking spaces across the street, okay, along with some street parking as well. I think the thing we need to consider though, guys, that's really important to understand here is that you're gonna need parking, whether it's commercial or whether it's residential, you're gonna need parking. So we will, that's something we need to consider. I'll open up for any questions, and obviously we have some of our consultants here tonight as well too.
Right. Well, you gave a substantial amount of background relative to the path, the decision path that you've gone through, and how to alleviate the various constraints that you encountered in order to determine the best utilization of the property. So I guess that satisfies my original, I guess, surprise at what was being proposed versus what I last heard.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
So I understand the logic of that. Okay, no, I appreciate the delineation of what you just shared.
Really want to reemphasize to the council this evening that this was all originated about 3 weeks ago when this grant became available. And it was, wow, this is an opportunity to get dollars for the city of Marion to save one of their iconic structures, truly. Because right now we don't have a plan for the structure, for the sanctuary.
Yeah, so a follow-on question. So in your current renderings, how many residential units are you planning for?
Yep, Grant, 30 units.
Okay, so let's say the grant application is made, and this is kind of a program administration issue. I just want to make sure that if downstream we endorse an application, it goes in, and let's just play it out, it's approved. But in that intervening time, you go from 30 units to, you think of some things, you try to respond to a couple of other, emergent concerns, and let's say it goes down to 25. Does that then disqualify the award?
It is my understanding it is not, Grant. It's a great question. We did ask this question. It would simply just be notification to the ID, and they would reduce that per, the grant is based on a per unit basis. So if it's reduced from the 30 units to 28, for example, or 27, they would reduce the grant amount. Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You got it.
Go ahead.
Why not owner occupied? And I'm just looking through this. So I went to the Washington DC, and there's like, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 converted churches. And I'll take out the one that they turned into an art gallery that we do not want this to look like from the outside, considering it's a 4-sided mural. So that's my first question that maybe can't be answered, because I think we had a question if owner occupied could happen under this program, and it can, because another one we're looking at is owner occupied, right? First question. Second question, is the renderings that we see, like the windows have to come out, right? Like in order to convert this into residential, there has to be some changes, but for the most part, is it going to look the same? Would it look the same? Like, would it look like the pictures? Is that a pretty solid rendering of what that looks like?
Yeah, let's go back to that.
I'm trying to manage, I'm thinking of expectation. I think we've got a long way on this project in general, just kind of in community expectation discussions of where we can dream and go. And so is that what it would look like?
Yeah, one of the most important things to consider here is IEDA and the Community Development Block Grant. They don't hold quite the same standards that the historic tax credits do, but they really pay close attention to keeping and honoring the historic structure. Okay, so for example, the stained glass windows, I think you're probably referring to as well, right? Really important to the structure. Those wouldn't be sold. They wouldn't be thrown away. Those would a lot of ways be repurposed throughout the facility. Okay, so obviously you'd like to keep some of those windows where they are, but we also have to address code issues, asbestos issues, things like that. So, but those windows would remain in the facility, and because some of them are significant. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Kyle Martin with Martin Gardner Architecture. We've been working with our friends at Shive Hattery and Conlin, trying to figure out what's all available and possible with the structure, and with the windows in particular for the units. For the vast majority of the windows would need to be replaced with something that provides egress. It provides more clear daylight, more visual connection to the outside. So for instance, in the sanctuary space, most of those windows would need to be replaced with some kind of clear glazing and egress facilitating. Like Brian said, we're looking to repurpose those where we can. There are some common spaces so for instance, the center set of stained glass window there, that actually is part of a central circulation space. So that we're hoping we could preserve that in place. It'd be a really unique feature from both inside, and we'd still be able to tell part of the story with that stained glass from the outside. And there's a variety. The west face is probably the primary set of windows that we'd be able to keep and hopefully restore. But the vast majority of them with the apartment units, they'd need to be replaced with some kind of clear glass and egress.
And I'm assuming from the information provided, garden means I've lived in a
Basement, yeah.
garden apartment
Yep.
before, which meant the windows like,
Yeah, so the existing fellowship hall, which is kind of that south L shape, that has window wells, and it's not the best daylight, but for a garden level apartment, it's pretty decent. And we'd obviously be looking at all of those as far as should we dig them a little deeper? Should we widen them out? Can we create the opening of the window well bigger to allow more natural daylight and that sort of thing? One thing Brian mentioned about the commercial space. So right off of the alley, the commercial space that is kind of viable for the last little open spot on the block, that would be connected to the alley. It would be at ground level. And of course, there'd be a lot of interpretation with staff of the apartments are all up approximately 4 feet above the ground. Does this being lower at ground level qualify as the ground level? So there's a lot of layers of discussion to go through, also from the historic standpoint of how we restore certain things, how we repair certain things, and what falls within the guidelines of the grant from a historic and section 106 review. Thank you. That's great.
so I know multifamily means many families can live in a space, but when I look at these plans, it's a lot of 1 bedroom or lot, right? I don't see a lot of family space here. I see a lot of individual living space. Is one thing. So I guess that was my question, is like, why not owner? Is the only place for retail that one? I mean, would be, and can that be expanded to make that larger, to allow for like a larger restaurant space or a larger whatever commercial?
Absolutely. So within the overall pro forma, part of the challenge is what do we have access to exterior walls for those egress windows? So that south wing, that south L-shaped wing is probably one of the more viable areas to have a larger commercial space. Ideally, we'd have this sanctuary space so that we can preserve the openness, we can preserve more of the windows in their existing locations. But the really the most viable is probably that south section. That's one area that we would like to study more. We haven't, obviously with the compressed timeline, we've tried to maximize this grant and preserve options to move into the future. But the ideal thing is that this building could engage the uptown activity more than what it is, but yeah.
We really felt putting that commercial space and continue to examine that on that Art in the Alley walk would really make a lot of sense. That would be the best place. That would be the most attractive to a potential tenant, is to put them on the Art in the Alley walk, to extend that and to beautify that and make that just an extension of what the great work that's been done already to the Art in the Alley. So.
Okay, so kind of back to, so who is then the apartment? Who owns the apartments when this is all, if this would all go through, then the apartments are
8th Avenue LLC, which is High Properties and Matt Mulligan with Conlon Construction.
okay. I'm going to come back to my owner occupied comment just one more time, just because I just have to, because I look at those church ones in Washington and there's like them, I think 7 of the 9 are condos.
Right.
Not apartments. And I know there's purpose, but I just think.
I think it would be worth exploring. What's interesting about the grant is the grant has an income restriction.
Yeah.
So how does that work with single family homes or single family housing? We might want to review that program to see if that's even a viable option.
Right.
So, because I think the purposes behind it is for units. That's where that income restriction comes in. And we want to make sure we utilize income restriction very wisely as a council, and as myself saying it too. As Debbie Durham stated just 2 weeks ago, income restriction is your vet techs and your dental hygienists and your young professionals that we need more housing for. The 13 to, the $2,000 housing options that we have in Marion, we need more of the 500 square foot to 700 square foot apartments that are more affordable for young professionals in Marion that want to live in Marion.
Or the young professional that wants to own, but can't afford a standalone
Sure.
home, or wants to live in the
Sure.
vibrancy, but they want to have some ownership of that
Yeah.
piece too as well, that they can, do all the great things in our uptown.
Right.
Brian, I want to make one,
sure.
one comment. So Matt Mulligan with Conlon Construction. So something was said that I think is critical. So the opportunity to preserve options is what we're in pursuit of here, and that's what this grant does. And so, as we talked about, does it go from 30 to 25? Maybe it does. Does it go from 30 to, 20 with the addition of commercial? Maybe it does. As Brian suggested, the grant is pretty fresh in everyone's mind. We just got wind of it. So this, what's in front of you is the maximum. What is the maximum amount that we can effectively produce in the building as is? Kyle's done a great job of that. There's probably, some in there we're going to want to modify, and, that's going to play out in the grant, of course. But the goal is, we want the support from the city at this point, but there's a lot of work yet to be done, of course, in terms of how many make sense in this particular allotment. So I think it's prudent to understand that, those lines could move left or right, up and down for sure. And we expect that. I mean, Kyle's had about 2 days to figure this out. So in all fairness to him, we're hustling as quickly as we can. So I want to highlight that, but I've got to be very frank, as the owner of the building, I didn't know where to go with the historic tax credits being subjected the way that they were. We've done a lot of historic work. I was taken aback by that. That's a significant credit that we were not able to pursue. Significant. The new building is easy. That's a non-issue. That's easy. It's going to be a great addition to downtown. It's of no value to downtown without this being accomplished along with it. And so this is a very critical point. I can't go to the bank and suggest this makes any sense without the addition of these particular credits, because it just won't work. The value in revenue produced is literally 25% if you went straight commercial. Right? This is all building, a lot of volume, but not a lot of square footage. So adding that second level it's desperately needed to make this pencil out, and our banking partners across the street, so they see it, they know it. So from my perspective, I wanted to highlight that this isn't necessarily what we set out to do, but the rent rates cannot be supported by any business. It's just the cost to put it back together without tax credits, just historic tax credits. It doesn't work. And, we knew this when we got into it, that we're going to have to move a mountain to get this to work. And here we are. So I felt it was prudent that was shared. So we want to preserve options. This credit does so. There's a lot of work yet to be done from this point forward. So I wanted to share that. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, because that was my big question was, is this it, or is there modifications that could be done? So I appreciate you bring that up.
Really early, Will.
Sure, yeah.
Really early, yeah.
I have two questions after going through all this conversation and discussion. Two questions about the program itself, not necessarily for you guys. One is on the grant per unit. Is the grant per unit the same whether the unit is 300 square feet or 1,000 square feet?
It is a flat per unit rate, and it's a little bit different for owner occupied than it is for multifamily, but for all multifamilies, it would be the same rate regardless.
So that's one reason maybe why they're driving a lot more smaller units in this building then, to maximize the amount of money.
It would maximize the grant.
Right? Okay, I want to make sure that was clear. And then if anybody gets an award, is there a time frame in which they would have to utilize that money? And what is that time frame?
The state is looking for shovel-ready projects, so the goal, they haven't set an absolute start deadline, but the goal is to have environmental reviews completed over the late winter, early spring months, and start seeing construction starts, if possible, in 2023. I
Okay,
think
so
if there
fairly
were,
aggressive schedule then.
yeah, for a significant undertaking like this, there might be more flexibility, just understanding the historic constraints of the project. So that might be able to be negotiated, but they are looking for very shovel-ready projects.
I can answer that too, Steve. From a project award, it's 2 years. So you have 2 years from project award to complete. We would,
To complete.
yes, we would, in this project, we are ready. We would start demolition immediately here in the spring.
Okay, thanks.
Grant, go ahead.
Well, I just, back to the registration, Park Service Historical District. I just looked this up and I shared it back with you, David, that what the Park Service has is 1277 8th Avenue is a contributing structure.
Correct.
So anyway, I just, that's a footnote. I guess I just want to again say I appreciate the delineation and that you've gone through to outline sort of how you started and how you got to where you're at and the impediments that had to be overcome. I'm just going to generally say I think we have to find a way to protect, preserve, and make this structure a longstanding attribute in our uptown. So I guess at this point, I'm kind of just satisfied with what I've heard.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank
Will,
you.
can I,
Who's
Councilman,
talking? Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, can I just clarify, just in preparation for Thursday night, as our responsibility as a city is to provide a resolution of support. So based on the conversations tonight, what I think I'm hearing is based on some of those, the different criteria you're talking about, taking a look at parking, taking a look at more commercial opportunities, those types of things. If we put that within the letter of support, and then knowing that we have to come back and have further conversation and zoning from what is it, U1 to UTC, then we have to circle back with that. So knowing that that they have more work to do, then therefore we have a little more work to do. But for them to move forward, for the state to look at their application seriously, they will be looking for a letter of support. So I want to know if by putting that criteria that you each talked about within that for more discussion, would you be comfortable in having a letter of having that letter of support?
Go ahead.
That's one of the reasons I was asking about the time frame, because my major issue with this is it's creating, magnifying a parking problem that's already there, making it much worse. I'd hate to be in that neighborhood next to it, within a couple of blocks. I just can't imagine anybody, and those streets are pretty narrow anyway, and if we don't already have one side parking only, it'll be coming probably sometime in the future. So I really see that as an issue. That's why I was asking about the time frame, because the city's talking about doing a parking study. Obviously, that is not going to be done maybe in the time frame appropriate to help out on this particular situation. But I'm really concerned. I understand the historic value. I'm certainly in support of anything we can do to save the building, but I'm really concerned about magnifying an already existing problem that may not get better for a very long time. So that's the concern I have. I don't know what you could put in there that might soften that, but so that's my concern.
Randy.
Kim, do we have anything that we need to be thinking about as far as any potential asks in the future on this financially? Where do we stand? We know that there may be some support. This is already a church that already has been on a non-taxable basis to the city. Has there been any conversations around that yet at this point that would want to alter or change our letter of support for what the next shoe dropping, so to speak, might be?
Sure. At this point, we haven't got to that depth. I mean, the project definitely for the funding through the state would have to be approved, and then we would be working through those things. So certainly more to come with that, as far as if you're talking about what those incentives look like as support to the project. Right now, they're not asking for that support within the application, but like I said, it's more to come. And without the state's approval, I'm not sure then where they would be. So
Sure. So at this point, we're just at the juncture of just a letter of support is the ask of the council at this particular time.
correct.
To consider moving it forward. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I guess my thought on that would be, I would worry that that may hurt their application if we're putting in a bunch of specifics in there. So my thought was maybe we don't, and then obviously if they do get it awarded, but then something happens and it just doesn't come to fruition, they don't get the money. I mean, it's
So still,
plain and simple.
still though, what we'll bring to you on Thursday is a letter of support.
Correct.
For approval, but it would have to be based on the ability to rezone and to have those considerations for rezoning, to have more discussions about that commercial. So, I mean, right now, based on how it's presented, we as staff are not recommending it because it doesn't meet the code and it doesn't meet. So there's those list of things. So if we're willing to navigate through those, then that gives us, as staff, it gives us a little more direction. And then whether or not you support the letter.
Sure. I guess my thought would be that I wouldn't want our letter to be in a negative. So we're in support, but we're putting a bunch of negative items in our support letter. Yes, sir.
Just to add on, well, sorry about that. For all those that are sleeping. Okay. So what we can do, and where Kim was going with this, is to just try to make sure that we're capturing the feelings of the respective council members. Because it is, I mean, with something like this, we're asking you to provide support for something that hasn't gone through our planning and zoning process, HPC, all those entitlement processes that we have established by code. So trying to provide you with a level of comfort. We can make sure that the letter of support that gets incorporated in the packet recognizes that there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, even with the first one that staff did recommend, there is a level of zoning that would have to be, that the petitioner would have to go through. So just because the council would be expressing your support, there is no guarantee that it would that it's not a blank check to ride through the city process without any sort of addressing those concerns. Correct. So we can work on.
I was just going to ask Paula if you had any insight on that as well.
So one of the application components is documentation of proper zoning or a path to obtain it. So I think there's some flexibility in how the city would provide a letter that indicates willingness to undertake the rezoning application subject to all of your requirements.
Sure. And that's where I was going to go to, was we could put that in there, but in a positive light, like, yes, it does need to be rezoned, but the city's willing to look at this to make sure that it could, be rezoned. Yes, Grant. Go ahead.
Well, I was, first off, Will, I was gonna maybe simplify your concern about the caveats. I just don't want us to caveat ourselves into oblivion. Okay, that's, okay, you can laugh if you want to. The real concern that I also have, though, is do we have visibility to the evaluation criteria by which this application would be evaluated? I'd like to, I just want to make sure we don't step on a landmine, given the relative criticality of trying to save this structure.
If you're asking about the state's evaluation criteria that they will use to evaluate applications, that is available online on IEDA's website. And that's something we could forward to staff and they could send
that would be great.
Link.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
We also, I didn't get a chance to say, we also went through the design consultation meeting with IEDA, and they were very much in favor of what we were doing. And to your point about meeting some of this criteria, there was 8 different criteria items, And he went down the line and we met every single criteria for this structure. So they were very much in favor of this project, not only on the visit, but also in the design consultation meeting we had with them as well. That was mandatory.
Okay, any other questions? Ryan had a question. He raised his hand. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, and this one I would ask
back
if
to the
the
mayor.
applicant is in the audience. Earlier today, yesterday, we received some communication that the applicant isn't interested in proceeding with this. Staff was unable to make a recommendation on this one. This one had some, I wouldn't say fatal, this one had some significant hurdles to overcome. So are we recommending taking this off? Do we remove this?
Paula, does it make any sense to, at this point, we wouldn't be recommending the approval of this, and with the applicant informing you that they are pulling their application, does it make any sense for council to take any action?
We don't have a need for any action since people
Okay. So bam, that discussion just got a lot quicker.
Ryan? Are you next? Equity?
Yeah, sorry.
I think I'm
Kim,
next.
Kim is going to
Okay.
handle this, yes.
Thanks.
All right, good evening. I have the opportunity tonight, and not only the opportunity, but the honor to update and report back to council in regards to the City of Marion's Equity Initiative and our progress for 2022. And I do have to say, I am very honored. This task that we have led on is very important task. And throughout the last couple of years, you've had many opportunities to talk in large groups, small groups, whether it's city staff, along with community members and such. So it's good to see, and very much appreciative of Marion being committed to creating the vibrant community, as it says here, and make it a welcoming community that is accessible and attractive and open to all residents and visitors. So in this process, there were many points that were related to the task that they made, task force that made recommendation. These right here are all lists of activities that that people have been engaged over the last couple of years. With those, I think it's important to point out some of the matrix and those software programs and the different things that we're doing within our community, such as the build out of record management system. That's something with the police department that they're working through with a firm to be able to do that. Along with developing an equity statement, we have processed that through the Civil Rights Commission. They've done a lot of great work there. And we just recently have shared that with our school districts as well, waiting for some feedback from them to be able to bring that back to you for approval. We've also initiated the compensation study. You've heard about that over the last couple months, along with, again, implementing an applicant tracking system so that we're looking at demographics, who's applying for our jobs. Not only that, looking at the demographics that help us engage in different demographics of people who would apply for a position in any of whether it's public services, library, wherever. We've also engaged with our equity consultant, Thomas Newkirk, who's looked at our employee handbook. Those are some of the changes that you saw that Lucas talked about earlier. Our emphasis on and investment in training. We've had some of that training. We'll continue to build upon that training. Library working to become a sensory certified organization, planting trees,
in the areas that, that there's nature, areas that are deprived of nature. GIS data, I mean, you can just see there's so many things that we have worked on over the last couple years. And this is just truly, these are all building blocks to our organization. And as I have ICMA this last fall, I took my whole training for the week was on DEI. And a lot of that conversation, as you know, DEI is evolving now, and now we're adding B, belonging. Some of the conversation that we had internationally was diversity, equity, inclusion. Does inclusion come before diversity and then equity? And then recently talking more about belonging. So this is a big subject, and to get our minds wrapped around and continue to move forward in our initiatives. We will continue to work on our DEIB initiatives. And just to recap, our initiatives to be more visible to our workforce, providing leadership abilities focused on DEIB and designed to improve in those areas. Talent management, onboarding, benefit processes. There's just so many things, building upon our culture and continue to build upon our positivity, compliance, removing our biases, being aware of our biases, boost engagement. There's so many things that we are working on and will continue to work on. So I think you have a great report that is really showing us moving forward and being very engaged in this initiative. Thoughts, comments, questions?
Questions? Go ahead.
Well, just as I take a look at the agenda memo, I looked at it the other day. A lot of, and I think you said this, Kim, a lot of these commitments or action items are just fundamental to things that we're already doing that we need to do. It's and so strategic planning, I mean, so there's a specific equity issue that ties into the overarching construct of our strategic planning. So I guess what this amounts to is this isn't like it's a wholly isolated, independent effort that requires another layer of discrete labor investment. It's just what we're doing.
Right.
Okay.
And it really is just it's not making a checkoff list. That this is something that this is the lens that we're looking through when we're putting policies together, procedures, when we're looking at employee handbook, when we're working with the Civil Rights Commission. It's a lens, it's not a checklist. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Seth.
Good evening. We're here to propose a restructure for the Recreation Division, and this solely comes from a recent vacancy that we've had in our department, Recreation Supervisor. With this vacancy, we had a chance to review and wanted to address. We took a look and best practice to look at our organizational and look at some of the opportunities and areas for improvement. Some of those opportunities are within our strategic plan. We have strategic goals to enhance recreational culture and large opportunities. Our Parks Master Plan identified 9 service areas of programming in which we have gaps within senior programming, outdoor recreation, also in teen programming. And then also looking at into the near future with the Central Plaza project, specifically the ice skating ribbon, some program and service opportunities that hopefully we can address with this restructure. So the restructuring that we're looking at is taking the vacant recreation supervisor position and an existing part-time recreation coordinator position and combining the two to form 2 full-time recreation coordinator position. This is a difference of $24,000, which is all made up from potential benefits. When we plan for the benefits side, we will always do the richer of the plans until that position is filled. And we're looking at making this effective at the start of the new year. So with the differences being met, I did, or in between the current and proposed, I did want to take a look at our show, our program revenue side of it. When we do have an increase in FTEs, we showed a jump within our program revenues. And this is a forecast based on our past trends. And then we also compared it to our FTE equivalents or full-time equivalents based on the years. By year 5, we're closing the gap. This is all total salary. It would be assumed that our net revenues from this would also increase over time, like it has in the past. So in conclusion, what we're looking at accomplishing with this proposal is expanding some of our recreational services, closing our enhancing some of those gaps and expanding those opportunities. We're also looking at the future ice loop on those operations to be able to offer some of those services from Learn to Skate, some of those types of programs there, also being able to facilitate maybe future rentals. And then also this frees up time for staff to be able to work on other opportunities from our program sponsors, rental equipment, partnerships, volunteer and staff training to help become more efficient in our programming and see a higher, more efficiency for cost recovery. Any questions? We will have, if council would approve or like to move forward with this proposal, we'll have a motion to approve it on Thursday to move forward with it.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment. I guess what I'm hearing from all of this, Seth, is with this change, restructure, which I applaud you for even looking at, is we're going to give people more reasons to come to Marion or move to Marion. So from that standpoint, I like it.
Randy.
So I think I got a question. We got so many challenges in our city with other, we got payroll topics, we've got wages, to move this. And first of all, and I want to applaud you as well too for restructuring this. So the ask at this particular time though, is as an additional 24,000.
Potentially, I mean,
and I'm hearing a lot of emphasis being put on that ice loop. If we don't do the ice loop, where do you plan on reallocating those dollars?
So even if we didn't do the ice loop, we have other service areas, as I said, in the strategic plan, and then also within our Parks Master Plan. We have other areas as far as outdoor recreation, team programming, esports is coming up. We have other areas that we have current gaps in, and we work with our partners such as the YMCA to help close some of those gaps, but they're still looming. And then there's the opportunity just to be able to enhance and expand some of the program services that we're providing for the community. The difference to 24,000 can be made up with some of the revenues we're bringing in for those. It could also be made up with some of the initiatives that we'll probably be working on, but not shown in here is sponsorships to help subsidize some of these programs. So we're not completely subsidizing from property taxes essentially to help run some of the programs and expand those offerings. But yeah, I mean, as we're growing, it gives the opportunity for those two positions to be able to grow with the services we're providing. So it's not such a burden on the property tax and burden on the organization, if that makes sense.
Sure. So what I'm hearing you say is it sounds as if though we've got some opportunities internally to backfill some of these asks, obviously without modifying too much of our budget and our payroll in the current fiscal year for your department, correct?
On Thursday, we won't be making any amendments. That will be something that, we wanted to show you this because it could be a financial impact. And so until we get to the end of the fiscal year, we really won't know. And that's solely based on, once we fill the positions, and then also based on where we're at budgetary with the Parks and Rec bottom line, we could be good, I guess.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Go ahead.
Real quick, thank you. That's your question, understanding and knowing in the partnerships we have with you all. I mean, when you look at, for those who don't know it, I mean, with 800 kids in the most recent session of youth basketball, the fact that you're looking at ways to, the people who are interacting directly with them all the time, the same people we need, you need, and that you're looking at ways that we can help enhance that with everything else going on. I cannot believe you do what you do in this community with the numbers that we're seeing and the programs that are done. So great job.
That's Carly and stuff.
Anything else for Seth? All right,
Your
thank
Honor,
you.
just
Oh, yep.
one thing, and I didn't hear if Seth said this or not, but there will be a resolution. I know you'd asked about, is the ask right now $24,000? Right now, the actual ask will just be authorization to proceed with this. So that will be on the agenda for Thursday.
Thank you.
Any monetary ask will come later in the form of an amendment.
Kesha. You're up again.
Let's see what time it is. We'll make this quick. So I just wanted to give the council, what better the time than now, right? To give the council an update. I didn't find any presentation since the last 10 years. So I thought now is perfect time to update the council on annexations. And so something to be aware of in the last 10 years, so I found PowerPoint from 2012. So in the last 10 years, we've had 13 annexations of over 1,000 acres in total for all those 13. And in the last 10 years, we've had an annexation every year go before council, except for 2019 and 2020. So just a little food for thought. All of the annexation areas are up there in blue. There's a couple lighter areas that were more recent within the last couple of years, but so just to refresh or new information for some. So there are 3 different ways that the state allows the city to complete annexations of property into our jurisdiction. So one is voluntary. It's 100% of the property owners have signed an application for annexation. Doesn't matter if it's 1 acre or 100. 80-20 is where 80% of the land area must be consenting or petition to be annexed, and up to 20% of the land area can be non-consenting. So usually keep it way less than 20 is ideal. And so that's still considered a voluntary petition to the state. The state did this a number of years ago to allow cities to bring in non-consenting properties to avoid the creation of an island of county jurisdiction surrounded by the city, or to also create more even boundary lines. Again, that jagged tooth city boundary that they're trying to avoid. The last one is involuntary, where less than 80% of the land area is proposed to be petitioned into the city. This, I have not gone through this since I have been with the city. This is something the city council staff has generally strayed away from because there are a number of requirements, additional hearings, additional review that are required with involuntary annexation according to state code. And so when a property would be annexed into the city, the property owner is going to have different police, different fire coverage. They're going to have maintenance and snow clearing provided by the city instead of county. And we may already in some cases be plowing in front of their property because of 2080s, but city assumes solid waste collection, recycling collection, stormwater and urban forest fees would be billed to the property. The thing is that we don't provide them with sanitary sewer or water. That is something that they would request. So as long as their septic system is functioning, assuming they're on a septic system out in the county, as long as their septic system is functioning per Lynn County Public Health, they are allowed to continue with that as long as their well is functioning and they don't need to drill a new one.
that would be allowed. Any new well would be required to be approved by the water board. So I don't know that we've had that come up a whole lot. And so tax implications are usually the question, what's gonna happen to my taxes? So in FY '23, the proposed tax difference is $11 per thousand of assessed valuation. So coming to the city, some of the county taxes drop off and then the city taxes come on board. So that change equals about $11 per thousand. And so to alleviate this, the state has set a maximum incentive that cities can provide to annexed properties. It's a 10-year sliding scale. I'll get to that in the next slide. And typically the council has been approving the 10-year sliding scale for all existing residential properties since it is a change for them. And so this is the last slide. So the house values is just kind of simple math, just looking through or thinking through that 10-year sliding scale. A house value of $200,000, and if it's a 50% rollback. In '23, it's going to be 54%. In '24, it's going to be around 56%. But simple math, if it's 50% rollback, the tax valuation, right? The taxable value would be $100,000. That's not assuming any other homestead exemption, military exemption, just simple math. And so with that taxable valuation, $11 per thousand. So you're looking at that $1,100 increase in when city taxes would get applied. And so again, applying that 10-year transition, years 1 and 2 would look at that 25% of the valuation. And so years 1 and 2, their taxes would be increased. The city taxes would be increased. So $275 per year, years 3 and 4, it'd be 440, so on and so forth, until that 11th year after annexation that they would receive that full city tax bill. And that's again, only for existing residential. New residential, if the land is subdivided, that does not apply to land that is annexed to specifically be developed. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
If we take a look at the city limits where we're at today, we've pretty much consumed all of, I'm gonna guess, the majority of residential. So the rest that's kind of hanging out there would be agriculture. Does it make sense to revisit the 10-year rule that we've currently had on that? Because we'd be looking at the agriculture land on that basis. And what concerns me the most is when we start taking a look at that, we're already taken over territories that have broken down roads, they're chipped over asphalt roads. I've lived on these roads that we have now annexed, and that's what's crippling our infrastructure when we go to this annexation. I'm just questioning that out there to ask ourselves, is it still viable to take a look at that 10-year rule on that when we take a look at the districts that we have left now? Because we're really taking a lot of the residential out of that component. Thoughts, questions,
And
comments?
so the residential is the 10-year incentive, the tax transition is for existing residential properties, right? That does not apply ag, so.
Okay, so
new
ag is-
development. So when a 40-acre piece is annexed in, so say we take in the 40-acre piece and we take in an acre. So somebody lives on the acre, right? So we give the residential that 10-year transition for their existing house. But if that 40 acres is subdivided, those houses, when they are built, they pay full taxes.
Okay, so if somebody's on 15 acres and there's a house and they section that back off, you're saying then that what's rezoned then out of agriculture back in, or excuse me, it doesn't have to be rezoned to agriculture. You're saying though, if it's parceled back off, then that comes back over to the normal tax base.
Yes.
On
for
the
sure.
normal roll.
For example, the 20 acres that we annexed in, so the city council approved it in January of 2022. It went to the city development board. That plat, so like there was a residential property, 2 residential properties, existing houses. So those residential properties would get that 10-year transition. The remainder of the 20, the developer would come forward with the rezoning request, with the plat request, and those individual houses would be taxed at the full rate right from the get-go. The caveat is in the approving resolution that the tax transition applies to properties
Okay,
that aren't further subdivided. Once they subdivide, that goes away.
great. Thank you. Okay, I'll retract my question on that because that was the thing I had a concern about on the 10-year rule on that. So that clears that up for me. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, Steve.
So how does it work in a situation, let's say we got 10 acres and 5 houses on it, all with septic. And a couple of those start going bad and a couple of the people want sanitary sewer. So how does that work on when do we determine when we extend sanitary sewer to a group like that? And then who pays the cost?
That's a very good question. And so typically, I don't know, Mike, if you want to chime in, but
Yep. So whether they can use their existing septic system or whether they have to, they have to go to an actual main that we would supply.
Right.
Lynn County Public Health actually makes the determination. So whether they can rehab the existing one, whether they can put in a new one, they determine that. So if they're within a certain distance, and I don't know off the top of my head what it is from an existing sewer main, then Lynn County Public Health may say you have to tie in. You don't have a choice. Your septic is failing. You need to tie into the system. What we've actually done in the CIP is there's some projects in there that are putting sanitary sewer into those locations. And what we do in the past practices, at least, is we develop what that full project is. So let's just use big numbers and say it's a $5 million project to do an entire subdivision. We then split that up, whether it's by acres, by lots, whatever makes sense. We take that total cost and we split it out and we put an access fee. And then those property owners, not only do they then have to run it from their house, which maybe it goes out the back into their backyard for this leach field, or now maybe the sanitary sewers in the front. So they'd have to get their own plumber to get that from the back of the house, to the front of the house. So they'd have that cost, which is thousands of dollars.
Right.
And then they would have to pay their proportionate share of the rest of it. And with that, typically then we look at, do we urbanize the streets if we have them all tore up, or is it something that we put it in the ditch next to the street and leave it as a rural cross section? So that can really snowball into a big project where you're basically building a new subdivision if it's an old chip seal road that you're bringing up to city standards. So that can get very pricey, but we don't do a fee for the street or the storm sewer. We would just do the fee for the actual sanitary sewer, and we would have to determine, what's the best way to do that. So a good example would be the area west of 10th, north of Tower Terrace. With that, we had, I believe, Anderson Bogert draw it up and just give us a high level cost estimate. What's it going to take to sewer this? Because at some point, that's what's going to happen. And there's going to be a future council meeting that we're going to have where we're going to talk about Smithland Drive, which is, so it's east of Albernet, south of Echo. And so that's an old county subdivision that we annexed in as well. And we now have 3 or 4 services that are like 600 feet long because they can't do their leach system anymore. And so at some point, we have to make the determination of when do we pull that trigger. So there's no magical equation that says when you have to do it. We have to work with the people at Lynn County Public Health because they're the ones that ultimately decide whether you can do a leach system or whether you have to tie into it or not.
So it becomes fairly expensive for the homeowner to proceed with that path then.
There's also opportunities too. I'm just going to add a couple things in here just because I've had to personally go through this, but there's also the opportunity for the homeowner to put those connections in at the time of installation because it's a lot cheaper to do it at that time. They don't have to connect until, like what Mike said, if your septic is failing, Lynn County, if they don't allow you to permit to either repair or replace, then you're forced to connect onto it. And then you can come back later. And like I said, if you put those connections in there, then they can just, they get a company to come out and just physically make that connection. And then they have to terminate their existing well or their septic. And then their well, they can keep their well also, but it has to be proven that it's disconnected from the service to the house or the residence, and they can use it to water their yard and use it for non what they call potable water. But am I wrong on that, Mike?
The well, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's really to their advantage, and it's a nice feature for them to pay that few $100s to get all those connections in there, so that they don't have to tie back into that system again later. But
and one thing
those are valid issues.
Yeah, one thing that Dave reminded me of is one thing that we've seen, especially on the Smithland Drive, is even if Lynn County tells them you can go ahead and repair your leach system, because of the new nitrate requirements and everything that they have to go through in order to do that, sometimes it's actually cheaper for them to tie into the sanitary sewer that we provide versus rebuild their septic system. And we've gotten some push on that as well.
And then I think their utilities are modified as well too. So if they're not on that, then that portion of it is taken care of off of the.
Yeah, if they don't have a water meter, the Public Service Board has a set rate that they use for residential.
Yes.
Just sorry to jump into this. I just, as we talk about annexations and how it would look like voluntary 80-20 or involuntary. I think under any scenario, the council would have the ultimate say. So much like the subdivision or the request that we talked about earlier in this council meeting, my expectation is that we're going to go through a level of analysis and provide the council with that information to make that informed decision. So in the particular item that I'm talking about, and Dave or Kesha, if you can remind me, it was the Yorkshire F3. In that situation, it didn't meet our standards. And so if it's not meeting our standards, we're not going to necessarily want to, there's got to be a really good reason why we'd want to take over a parcel of land or a couple acres if it's not going to meet our standards. So, you know, if they have a failing septic system and they come to us and say, hey, look, we want to, we'd like to be annexed in. Well, there's going to be that level. Well, here's the expectation. You got to bring it up to our standards before we take it in. So there is a level of protection for the community on that side. And I fully expect that if we have those requests or if we're pursuing them, we're doing that analysis.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kesha? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro
And-
Tem, I
yeah.
move to adjourn to closed session regarding a real estate transaction and litigation as permitted under section 21.51J and section 21.51C of the Code of Iowa, two separate matters.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding real estate transaction and litigation as permitted under section 21.51J and section 21.51C of the Code of Iowa. Can we get a legal statement, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have reviewed the proposed subject matter for closed session and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code Section 21.51J and 21.51C.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Mr. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Menzer. Yes. Mr. Sternad.
Yes.
We are adjourned to closed session. Thank you.